Invincibility begins with contemplating the sun. Hey, fanfic family. So glad to see you here again to continue this incredible adventure. As always, kindly remember, this story is 100% fiction. So don't go looking for dimensional portals in your closet. All rights to this fantastic novel belong to the original author. We're just your humble narrators of epic tales. Are you enjoying the fanfic? Show it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and dropping us a like. And if you're impatient for more exclusive content, our Patreon is your happy place. Chapter 351 Metaphysical Concepts. The immortal figure's hand manifested something wondrous. It seemed to be a power, a substance, or perhaps a thought, a concept, mysterious and enigmatic, utterly unfathomable, impossible to define precisely. Heng frowned slightly. Metaphysics, he asked. That's right. The metaphysics is called Tao, the physical is called Qi. The immortal figure nodded. The so-called creation factor is a metaphysical concept sufficient to construct heaven and earth, to construct space-time. This concept is different from laws, it is something more primordial. You can understand it as the source of heaven and earth, using this source to construct heaven and earth. Once you grasp this concept, nothing within heaven and earth can harm the one who grasps the creation factor. For example, try punching me with all your might right now. He smiled smugly, looking at Heng. Heng raised an eyebrow slightly. Are you sure? I'm sure. Don't worry about me, you can't hurt me. The immortal figure said calmly, unconcerned. Heng nodded. His cultivation circulated within his body, his blood and Qi erupted, and the 3 flowers and 5 Qi resonated simultaneously. At the same time, the 28 layers of heaven he had created unleashed immense power, drawing upon the laws of reincarnation, and he threw a punch. The immortal figure raised an eyebrow upon seeing this. This kid's attack is truly ruthless. He's using all his strength. Even when he blew up that monster from the future, he didn't use that much power. Does he really want to kill him? Of course, that was his thought, but he didn't resist. Sure enough, Heng's full force punch passed right through the immortal figure's body, causing no harm whatsoever. Heng calmly withdrew his fist, lost in thought. The immortal figure smiled slightly. Having mastered the elements of creation, while not a true creation realm expert, one completely crushes those below the creation realm. Facing attacks from those below the creation realm is like being in an indestructible, eternally sacred place. They cannot harm you. At that time, even with overwhelming power, you will be helpless. The immortal figure earnestly warned. In his view, so what if Heng was a variable? Variables couldn't violate this ironclad rule. Otherwise, the Great Void would have been in complete chaos long ago. I think I understand, but I want to try throwing another punch. Heng nodded calmly. Oh, you're still not giving up? Then bring it on. The immortal figure was first surprised, then laughed. Anyway, no matter how many times this kid tried, he couldn't break this ironclad rule. Letting this kid suffer a loss was good, to prevent him from becoming lawless and going to the future to seek death. Besides, he felt quite satisfied. This kid had never taken him, an immortal god, seriously. Now he'd let him know the power of an immortal god. All right. Heng nodded and threw a punch. Crack. His punch directly hit the immortal god figure, the explosive force sending the immortal god flying, turning into a shooting star, soaring into the distance. Heng withdrew his fist, nodding in satisfaction. It seemed the source of his power was still the eternal god. Crack. The surrounding void shattered, and the somewhat disheveled immortal figure stepped out from the void, reappearing before Heng with an incredulous expression. You, how did you do that? He roared in shock, his worldview shattered. Was it that difficult? Heng tilted his head, smiling slightly. When he threw his first punch, he vaguely sensed that it might not have any effect. He had always felt that the immortal figure was a dimension higher than him, seemingly outside the world, while he, no matter how strong, was still within the world, unable to reach the immortal figure. Sure enough, his punch passed right through. So, with his second punch, he added a little source power, directly sending the immortal figure flying. After a long while, the immortal figure calmed down, his breathing becoming even, revealing a very conflicted and complex expression. Heng, you're becoming more and more unfathomable to me. Haven't you always been unfathomable? Heng countered with a smile. The immortal figure was speechless for a moment. He wanted to refute, but after thinking it over, he felt it was pointless. He had never truly understood this kid, but he had been assessing his potential. Although, now it seemed, his potential exceeded his expectations. Did you gain control of a creation factor beforehand? For example, as an anomaly, you might have grasped factors related to fate and change, the immortal figure inquired. Li Heng shook his head. He was certain that source power wasn't a creation factor. The immortal figure breathed a sigh of relief. I don't think so. If you really had control over a creation factor beforehand, I would have sensed it long ago. Does that bother you? Li Heng asked. Of course it does. If one could gain control over a creation factor beforehand, it might be the reincarnation of an immortal, like some of my old friends, the immortal figure sighed. Of course, you're definitely not one of my old friends. None of my friends are as monstrous as you. He then changed the subject, speaking to Li Heng with absolute certainty. Li Heng's expression was subtle. Why did he feel like this was an insult? Fine, Li Heng shook his head, no longer dwelling on the matter, and asked, now I'm qualified to go to that future, right? If you can make this kind of method a regular occurrence, then you are indeed qualified. But what exactly do you want to go to that future? What is it there that's attracting you? Don't forget the real root cause is still this inexplicable calamity, this mysterious power. That so-called destined, hopeless future is merely a byproduct of the calamity and mysterious power. Without addressing the root cause, even if you destroy that hopeless future, you've only delayed things a little. The immortal figure said, somewhat puzzled. I have my own considerations, Li Heng said calmly. He was simply going to the future to harvest source energy. Of course, it wasn't convenient to say this aloud. The immortal figure shook his head. Fine, since you insist on going, I won't stop you any further. Take this, it can save your life if you encounter danger. He waved his hand. A ray of sunlight floated into Li Heng's hand. However, you must remember that once you use this ray of light, it's equivalent to taking my place and embarking on the path of the great sun, the immortal figure warned again. Li Heng, thinking it was a waste not to take it, accepted the ray of the great sun's light, then nodded dismissively. All right, I won't waste any more words. Remember, the true hope still lies in the true realm. The voice gradually faded into the distance. The immortal figure gradually disappeared, and the world resumed its flow. Let's go, time to get down to business. Without paying further attention to King Zili and Xiao Hao, Li Heng spoke calmly, turned, and left. Next, he needed to extract the future imprint from the Heavenly Dao book and harvest a source power. He calculated the time. He had previously ordered the collection of demons and monsters. It should have reached a considerable scale by now. Chapter 352 The Four Brahma Heavens Above All Heavens. The immortal figure returned to the sun, gazing down upon the heavens and earth. He remained puzzled. Since he possessed no element of creation, why could Li Heng's punch hit him? Could it be related to the unknown power Li Heng had previously unleashed? He couldn't help but connect the dots. The unknown. The immortal figure shook his head and sighed softly. It was precisely because of this unknown that calamity had arisen. He could only hope that everything would develop in a positive direction. He glanced once more at the world below, then his figure gradually disappeared, seemingly returning to the beginning of time along the river of time, making final preparations. In a vast plain, Li Heng looked up at the sky, then withdrew his gaze. Standing on a high platform, he looked down at the numerous, ocean-like demons and monsters before him. The Taoist sect and his 10 celestial subordinates had already sent over all the demons and monsters they had collected. In an instant, the place was filled with yin energy, demonic energy, evil energy, and malevolent energy, as if an unparalleled demon had descended upon the world, causing the surrounding normal beings to flee. These demons and monsters were all bound by a secret technique, unable to move, and could only look at the ethereal man before them in terror, wondering what this human wanted. The mortal world had been far from peaceful lately. Powerful battles raged, world-ending calamities raged, and even some powerful forces in the mortal realm were inexplicably targeting these idle demons and monsters, relentlessly capturing them. Now, they'd all been placed here. What were these powerful forces trying to do? Reporting to your excellency, our strength is limited, we can only capture so many demons and monsters. Yes, we've already wiped out all the demons and monsters within our respective territories, it's difficult to find any more. The 9 celestial beings that Li Heng had subdued spoke up. Senior, these are the demons and monsters collected by my Taoist sect. The Taoist celestial being said respectfully. They also knew that Li Heng was the great being who opened the cycle of reincarnation and resolved the current crisis, hence their increasingly respectful tone, hoping to establish a connection and curry favor. This was because there were rumors circulating in the mortal world. Reincarnation can resolve the pollution suffered by celestial beings. Li Heng nodded, not bad. Although, due to the fact that the mortal world is not the underworld, and considering the time and the coverage of their respective forces, the strongest among these demons and monsters is only at the Dharma aspect realm. With no celestial beings, their sheer number is enough to amass a very high amount of source energy. Li Heng estimated that if they were all killed, it would definitely exceed 10 million source energy. However, Li Heng estimated that the effectiveness of capturing them again would be greatly reduced after this, since the mortal world is not the underworld and is not currently part of the human realm, resulting in a smaller number of monsters. Moreover, this large-scale capture operation has already been detected by the remaining demons and monsters, most of whom have probably already gone into hiding, likely smuggling themselves into the underworld through various channels. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so few of them. However, Li Heng wasn't in a hurry. No matter how much these demons and monsters escaped, they would at most be circling between the mortal world and the underworld, the meat would rot in the pot, and they would be harvested sooner or later. Of course, if they really wanted a large amount of source energy, they would have to wait and see what the underworld would bring. However, if he truly wanted to enter the underworld to reap the rewards, he still needed to make some preparations and further enhance his strength to prevent awakening the underworld queen of the void realm, whose battle repercussions could affect the present world. You've worked hard. But this matter cannot stop now. This can also be considered a contribution to the myriad beings of the present world, Li Heng said with a faint smile. Although the world was constantly deteriorating, because all the major forces were capturing demons and monsters, the human world had actually regained a bit of clarity, something unprecedented in the past. In the end, as long as the underworld wasn't involved, the human race's foundation and strength were more than enough to suppress the demons and monsters of the present world. It was just that many powerful figures adopted an indifferent attitude. This is what we should do, these celestial beings replied humbly. Li Heng nodded, raised his hand, and the might of the Earth Dharma form pressed down, instantly annihilating the mountain-like number of demons and monsters before him without the slightest delay. None of these demons and monsters were innocent, they were all stained with blood. Moreover, these demons and monsters had previously hunted normal human beings, so now Li Heng was hunting them back. It was simply an eye for an eye. The celestial beings beside him were completely stunned. They had initially thought that Li Heng was collecting so many demons and monsters to forge something, such as divine weapons requiring demon blood sacrifices, or to refine supreme elixirs using demons and monsters as materials. But they hadn't expected him to kill them directly. They had thought Li Heng's earlier statement about killing for fun was just a joke. Li Heng closed his eyes slightly, and a large amount of source energy flowed into his account. His source energy had now reached over 20 million, making him a true tycoon, although he didn't know how long this tycoon status could last. He earned it quickly, and he spent it just as quickly. Alright, you can leave now. Just don't stop collecting demons and monsters. I need to go into seclusion for a while. With that, Li Heng stepped into the void and disappeared. Only the numerous celestial beings, still reeling from the shock, remained. Li Heng pondered the allocation of these source energies in the void. Above the 36 heavens system lies the 4 Brahma heavens. The 4 Brahma heavens are the supreme eternal harmony heaven, the jade soaring victory heaven, the dragon transformation Brahma heaven, and the peaceful nurturing heaven, transcending the 3 realms, which are above the previously established 28 heavens. According to the 36 heavens system of his previous life, these 4 heavens surpass the 3 realms, beyond the reach of the sun and moon. Their inhabitants illuminate each other with their own light, thus they are neither born nor die. Their lifespan has no end. Even during great calamities, they are untouched by disaster. All other heavens and lands below perish with a calamity, only to be restored to chaos upon the re-emergence of the calamity. This undoubtedly represents a significant leap beyond a previous level. Li Heng suspected that if he could fully establish these 4 Brahma heavens, he could directly reach the creation realm mentioned by the immortal figure, and perhaps even surpass it. After all, according to his previous life, the 3 realms are the heavens, while the 4 Brahma heavens are above the 3 realms. Therefore, continuing to establish the complete 4 Brahma heavens was out of the question. Because he had slightly sensed the required source energy, The consumption was astonishingly high. Opening the first level of the four Brahma heavens, namely the Supreme Eternal Harmony Heaven, required 10 million source energy. Moreover, this source energy consumption was different from opening the three realms heaven. It would continue to increase upwards. If you were to open the second level, the Jade Soaring Victory Heaven, the source energy required would only be more. His 20 million source energy was simply not enough. Therefore, Li Heng planned to first use 10 million source energy to open the first level, the Supreme Eternal Harmony Heaven, and then use 5 million source energy to integrate the various techniques he had learned to enhance his strength. Then he would go to the underworld. He would cut down the underworld heaven and harvest its source energy. Before going to that hopeless future, he would first elevate himself to the extreme, arming himself to the teeth. He wasn't a fool, knowing that there might be unexpected factors in the future. He wouldn't be unprepared and go to his death like a reckless youth. Having decided how to use his source energy, Li Heng's thoughts stirred. The 20 million source energy began to burn. Chapter 353 Taiyuan Daojing. One of the four Brahma heavens, the Supreme Eternal Fusion Heaven. Those who ascend to this heaven forget their ingrained habits and gradually enter a state of divine perception. As 10 million units of source energy burned, the Supreme Eternal Fusion Heaven materialized and was successfully created. Li Heng sensed his own rank beginning to soar, seemingly surpassing all heavens and transcending the world. Nothing within the world could harm him. Moreover, his strength surged immediately afterward. If he was invincible in the Voideo realm before, then now he was taking a step forward, breaking free from the Voideo realm, but not truly entering the creation realm. He might belong to the level of controlling the creation factors mentioned by the immortal voice. However, since Li Heng did not follow the immortal's system, he had not mastered, nor did he need to master, the so-called creation factors. Li Heng opened his eyes, divine light radiating, spreading throughout the surroundings, sweeping across the void. If the immortal's figure had not yet left this point in time, they would probably be greatly astonished, exclaiming in horror. This speed of advancement was faster than riding a rocket. Li Heng smiled slightly. With his strength now, let alone dealing with the yin world, it's more than enough to face the potential unknown dangers of that hopeless future. But this isn't over yet. His previous learning was too diverse, and at this level, he must integrate it all into one, truly establishing the Great Dao. He continued to consume 5 million units of source energy to upgrade the data panel's upgrade and point allocation functions, further expending his ki and blood to integrate the Taiyuan scripture, the martial scripture, the remnant of the pure yang scripture, the 3 flowers and 5 ki method, and everything else he had learned, achieving the ultimate sublimation. At this moment, Li Heng's body was filled with a misty aura. If anyone were fortunate enough to witness this scene, they would surely think that Li Heng had become a furnace of the Great Dao, with yin and yang fuels burning beneath him, seemingly refining and fusing something. Soon, everything returned to calm and normal. Li Heng slowly exhaled a breath of turbid air. He had actually forged a Void Dao realm level technique, suitable for his own path, its essence being a supreme scripture, named the Taiyuan Dao scripture, meaning to gather all the Daos of the world, with extremely high aspirations. He had originally thought that 5 million source energy could only raise him to the Void Heaven realm. It was probably because his current realm was extremely high, his starting point was different, and this indirectly reduced the consumption of source energy, thus allowing him to cultivate a Void Dao realm technique. Now, because of this upgrade of the technique, his own strength had taken a small step forward. If described using the immortal God system, he had just barely grasped the creation factor, but now he had completely mastered it, belonging to the strong at this level. However, such an improvement was extremely expensive. He now only had a little over 5 million source energy left. This amount of source energy was insufficient to support his further improvement. Calming his mind, Li Heng's gaze pierced through the void, shooting towards the underworld, startling many demons there. Ultimately, he still needed to explore the underworld, otherwise, where would he get his source energy? However, Li Heng didn't want to waste too much time. With a thought, he threw the heavenly Dao book into the netherworld, letting his netherworld emperor, his divine avatar, refine the future imprint. Although the divine avatar was definitely weaker than his main body now, because it was stationed in the netherworld and had the reincarnation law and reincarnation disc, it wasn't much weaker. Refining the future imprint would only be a little slower than his main body. But it wouldn't be much slower and wouldn't delay things. His main body would first go to the underworld to harvest source power, while the divine navigator would extract the future imprint from the heavenly Deo book, preparing for their journey to the future. The division of labor was clear. At this time, the underworld was in chaos, with demons rising up everywhere. The reason was that Li Heng's previous fishing had caused the major powers like Suspended Mountain and Yellow Springs Road to lose many powerful figures, making them unable to maintain stability in the vast underworld. The organization that bought life money was completely wiped out, and because it had penetrated the economic system of the underworld, the economic system of the underworld had also collapsed. The life-buying money possessed by numerous forces was now worthless, leaving the underworld in chaos and near collapse, almost reverting to primitive era of barter. I had no money before I died, and I still have no money after I die. Then I died for nothing. One of the ghosts, looking at the now worthless life-buying money, angrily threw it into the air, creating a rain of paper money, tears welling in his eyes. He regretted committing suicide. Young man, you're lucky. Look at the one next door. He scraped together a bunch of life-buying money, and now it's all worthless. He still has to pay off his debts, probably for 10,000 years. An old ghost passing by pointed with his cane at another ghost crying even more bitterly, offering words of comfort. And you, old man, why aren't you sad? The ghost asked, startled. Before the life-buying money incident, it was the only currency in the underworld, and should have affected every demon and ghost. Me? No money. The old ghost laughed, leaning on his cane as he smugly walked away. Ah, Tui, so you're a poor ghost. The other ghost was suddenly startled, spitting as it watched the old ghost's departing figure, completely forgetting that it too was a poor ghost. The old ghost slowly departed, mountains opening up and water breaking apart. Its speed wasn't fast, but in a very short time, it had already traversed the underworld and arrived at its edge. This edge was filled with mountains of graves as vast as the sea. This place had a resounding nickname in the underworld, 10,000 graves, forbidden land for 10,000 ghosts. The old ghost ignored the writhing skeletons by the roadside and the howling mist, weaving and hiding among the fleshy sprouts of the graves, slowly walking to the center of the graves. This center was very spacious, with only 3 bare graves. If these 3 graves weren't so high, they would really be just 2 small mounds of earth. Moreover, if someone were to look down from above the 100,000 graves mountain, they would surely see that the countless surrounding graves seemed to be guarding the 3 central graves, as if burying something extremely ominous. Strangely, however, one of the central graves appeared to have been hollowed out, its height reduced by half, revealing a dark, gaping hole. Or perhaps the owner inside had already escaped. The old ghost walked to the other 2 graves, knocked on them one by one, cleared his throat, leaned on his cane, and spoke loudly, "Get up. Something's happened." His words transformed into tangible sound waves, cleverly penetrating the 2 graves and echoing throughout the 100,000 graves mountain, lingering for a long time until a loud rumble resounded. The 2 graves immediately began to move, collapsing as if in an earthquake, but stopped halfway down, causing the old ghost to frown. Before the old ghost could speak, a sound came from within the 2 graves. "You old codger, what do you want by waking us up?" Yes, that's right. Is something important?" "Of course it's important. Get up, you two, stop sleeping. Can't you sense the great commotion happening in the underworld?" The old ghost frowned. "How, you poor ghost, you're such a busybody." Yes, that's right. What does the commotion have to do with us?" 2 voices continued shouting, filled with anger. "How, you two are really asleep. I'm telling you, I clearly sense that the underworld is about to face annihilation. If you don't get up, you'll die." The old ghost sneered. Speaking of this, his expression turned somewhat grim. In a corner of the future he vaguely sensed, a figure, indistinct even to him, shattered everything. Chapter 354 The 3 Mysteries of Poverty, Death, and Orphanage. "You old monster, you're lying to us again." That's right. There's a huge monster sleeping up there. How could the underworld possibly face annihilation? Even if that monster wakes up, the underworld will at most mutate and corrupt. We're all demons and monsters, what are we afraid of? The owners of these 2 voices clearly recognized their status as demons and monsters, completely disregarding what the old monster said, even mocking it. "How, you two, one a lone wolf, the other a ghost, how could you possibly understand the true future?" The old monster sneered, waving his withered, chicken claw-like hand, and an image appeared before them. In the image, the vast underworld was submerged in boundless light, flesh and blood dissolving, bones burning, everything seemingly about to cease to exist. Within that light, a silhouette could be vaguely seen. Shocked voices erupted from the two grave mounds. How terrifying! However, before they could react, a strange change occurred. The figure in his memory moved, seemingly turning slowly, as if sensing their spying and turning its gaze to find the one watching. The Kyanga was terrified and quickly deactivated the image. The next moment, the strange beings within the two burial mounds also realized what was happening and fell silent. In the void between the underworld and the realm, Heng traversed the void, intending to head to the underworld. He suddenly stopped, his brow furrowing slightly, sensing that beings were spying on him. However, since this spying seemed to be not on the spatial level but on the temporal level, it was difficult to detect. But he was certain that this spying came from the underworld. Heng smiled slightly. This was interesting. Had the heavenly realm of the underworld awakened, or were there still powerful beings above the celestial realm lurking there? If this was the case, he hoped there would be more. These were all large masses of walking source energy. With this thought, Heng continued onward. At this moment in the underworld, at the center of the 10,000 graves, the remaining two graves exploded, sending up clouds of dust and debris. From within the dust, two dark figures slowly emerged, gradually becoming clearer. They were as eerie as the Kyung-Gui, though their auras were distinct. One of these figures exuded an aura of loneliness and isolation, a chilling presence that warned the living to stay away, for approaching meant certain death. Even the laws of heaven and earth seemed to come alive, distancing themselves from this figure, turning the surrounding area into a vacuum of rules. The other figure was even more terrifying. Its appearance was accompanied by endless calamities. Tribulation clouds floated above its head, lightning flashed through them, and fires erupted from the void around it, burning its body. The laws of heaven and earth constantly targeted it, emanating an aura of imminent death and violent demise. Compared to these two, the old Kyung-Gui's aura was much simpler, describable in a single word, poor. Though simple, upon closer inspection, it felt even more terrifying than the other two figures. The three appeared together, radiating an aura of poverty, premature death, and loneliness. It seemed to be the source of all negativity in the world. Kyung-Gui, who exactly is that figure? This is clearly something that hasn't happened yet, so why does that figure sense it? What kind of terrifying being is this? The lonely ghost, exuding an aura of solitude, hurriedly asked. We're doomed. Judging from what happened just now, if that terrifying being intends to destroy the underworld, we old folks can't stop it at all. We should run to the great void. The calamity ridden Yao Gui immediately slid down and surrendered. I don't know who that figure is either, but I think we'll find out soon. I can feel this calamity getting closer and closer, it's about to arrive. Kyung-Gui closed his eyes, then opened them, and said solemnly. Then what are we waiting for? Run. Yao Gui urged hurriedly. How, you old codger, are you still half asleep? The world is changing, the calamity is descending, the great void has darkened, where are we going to run to? Are we going to die even faster? Kyung-Gui said coldly. Then what do you suggest we do? We can't defeat such a terrifying being. I suspect it has already reached the void realm, enough to rival that monster in the sky. Gui frowned. That's right, that monster in the sky. That monster is also at the void realm. If this terrifying being wants to destroy the underworld, it must confront that monster. So, Kyung-Gui, are you wrong about your prediction? Yao Gui exclaimed, both surprised and delighted. After what happened just now, do you think you could be wrong about your prediction? Kyung-Gui was speechless. These two were getting more and more confused the more they slept. They might as well have stayed in the mortal world like him. Then why will the underworld be destroyed? Could this terrifying being really defeat that monster? Yao Gui asked, puzzled. Then, because of this question, all three of them fell silent. It wasn't impossible. It's over, what should we do? Right, there's the mortal world. We can escape to the mortal world. Thinking of the mortal world, the neighbor of the underworld, Gui and Yao Gui quickly said. Kyung-Gui was silent for a long time before speaking. Don't even think about the mortal world, it's even more dangerous. Why? Gui and Yao Gui were surprised. Although the underworld did indeed split from the mortal world before, and the mortal world had more resources than the underworld, that was from a macro perspective. Their level had long since surpassed the heavens and earth. They were at the pinnacle of both worlds, and could freely travel between them, so what was there to fear? Not to mention that most of the powerful beings in the mortal world were no longer there, but had gone to that hellish place, so why worry so much? Because I suspect that terrifying creature came from the mortal world. And I'm telling you, that life-buying money monster is finished. He invaded the mortal world and was suppressed by the powerful beings of the mortal world. What? The two ghosts were instantly shocked, exclaiming in disbelief. The life-buying money monster had a great reputation among these Void Realm ghosts. He hadn't even reached the Void Realm, yet he had killed one, making many of them unwilling to provoke him. After the life-buying money monster reached the Void Realm, they dared not provoke it, fearing that this monster who sells life money would use some strange trick to ambush them again. But unexpectedly, this ferocious monster had fallen. Wait, the powerful being who suppressed that monster who sells life money, could it be the terrifying being you foresaw? Urga suddenly thought of something and quickly guessed. It's not impossible. Kyunga said in a deep voice. So let's escape to the Great Void. It's better than waiting to die, Yoga suggested. No, I have a plan. No matter how strong the terrifying being is, it's at most at the Void Realm, but you must remember that this is the underworld, our home turf. As long as we join forces with the other old guys and awaken that monster in the sky. Kyunga slowly spoke. We can easily kill the terrifying being? Yoga quickly asked. No, I mean, Kyunga said decisively, that way, as long as we swarm him, even if that terrifying being is invincible at the Void Realm, he can't possibly kill us all. Once that person's power is exhausted, he will also meet his doom. Chapter 355 The sun shines on the underworld. Good GUI Nyago GUI fell silent. They sounded a bit unreliable. Kyung GUI, seeing this, was also annoyed and spoke coldly. What else can we do? Going to the mortal world is certain death, escaping to the great void is also death. Where can we escape to now? Do we really want to go back to that hellhole? Don't forget, we stayed in the underworld because we realized how terrifying that hellhole was, and learned the truth about how it devours people without spitting out bones. Do you really want to walk right into a trap? You're right. GUI sighed, helplessly. How many old guys like us are left in the underworld? The three of us can't do it alone. Kyung GUI smiled smugly. Don't worry, I've been traveling around the underworld lately and found quite a few, about 10 it seems. Some old guys, like us, deserted at the last minute and didn't go back to that hellhole. So many? Good GUI Nyago GUI exclaimed in surprise. We're not fools, and neither are they. Realizing the terrifying truth, they naturally turned back. However, they went deeper than we did, so they paid a heavy price for their return. Most of them are either asleep or self-sealing to heal. Kyung GUI waved his hand, explaining the reason. Good GUI Nyago GUI exchanged a glance, even less confident. Even if these old guys were at their peak, they didn't think they could handle that terrifying creature if they all rushed at it. Now that many of them were injured, they were even less confident. You guys are really hesitant. Well, I'll just say it directly. I obtained a secret technique in that hellish place that can awaken that monster in the sky while strengthening it. That monster is already so powerful. If it were strengthened further, it would be able to rival that terrifying creature. Then, with us old guys replenishing our strength, how could we not kill the terrifying creature? Kyung GUI became increasingly annoyed and revealed his trump card. This is the underworld, our home turf. Fighting on our home turf and you're already hesitant and terrified? You've really gone back to your old ways, you have no courage at all. If you hesitate any longer, I'll go alone. The Kyunga began to look down on his two former companions. The two Kyunga, left with no choice, could only agree. Alright, we'll do as you say. Hopefully, everything goes smoothly. Good. But the calamity is drawing closer, so we shouldn't delay. Let's contact the other old guys and prepare in advance. The Kyunga was delighted and urged the two Kyunga tracked. Meanwhile, in the outer void of the underworld, Heng stood. Previously, when he entered the underworld, he carefully searched for passages and special nodes, fearing that any mishap would result in being swept away by sudden special turbulence. But now he could traverse the void. He could even break through the underworld's barriers with a single hand. With a thought, Li Heng waved his hand, and the hand of rules manifested in the void. Like tearing a piece of paper, it instantly rips open a massive gap in the once impenetrable barrier of the underworld, revealing its vast territory. Li Heng floated in, entering the underworld. Soon, tribulation clouds filled the sky above him. These clouds rapidly expanded, stretching for thousands of miles, the power of heavenly punishment permeating the underworld. Crimson lightning crackled within, growing ever stronger, becoming like a thunder dragon, clearly unwelcoming to this uninvited guest. At the same time, the surrounding laws and rules of heaven and earth were also vehemently rejecting Li Heng, seemingly determined to completely negate his existence, reduce his cultivation, and abolish his realm. Li Heng smiled slightly. This was truly a slight underestimation of him. Break. He uttered a single word, and the law followed. Unparalleled power rippled outwards, shattering the surrounding laws of heaven and earth, and breaking the chains of divine order that permeated the world. The vast tribulation clouds in the sky were forcibly dispersed, and the crimson lightning dragon let out a mournful howl before vanishing completely. The so-called divine punishment of the underworld was no match for a single word from Li Heng. Li Heng looked up at the heavens and saw the commotion. The monster was still unconscious, its breathing more rapid, as if on the verge of awakening. Only then did the demons and monsters of the underworld react. To trigger such a massive divine punishment and attack from the underworld, it was definitely an uninvited guest, and undoubtedly a hostile one. Surprised, they all turned their gazes to this place. Then, most of the demons and monsters were blinded. Behind Li Heng, the vast radiant sun Dharma image rose slowly, radiating boundless light, illuminating the underworld. All the yin energy, malevolent energy, demonic energy, and monster energy within the underworld began to melt and dissipate, like rain and snow meeting the warm winter sun. Their gazes had just landed here, precisely at the moment the radiant sun Dharma image rose, and they were directly devoured by its light, even though most of them were at the heavenly monster level. At this moment, the underworld trembled. The heavenly demons and monsters within the underworld panicked. They realized that this was definitely not a powerful being they could resist, and none dared to step forward, all planning to flee for their lives. Those with connections, such as those from powerful families, began contacting their ancestors or void realm elders they knew. For example, the poor, premature, and lonely monsters currently traversing the underworld were being contacted by various forces. In short, their phones were ringing off the hook. Of course, there was no need to contact them. The immense power Li Heng had created had already covered the underworld, and the three monsters, poor, premature, and lonely, as well as other awakened void realm demons and monsters, had already sensed it. The three monsters looked rather grim. They thought they had acted quickly, but they hadn't expected the calamity to arrive so swiftly. They had only awakened half their numbers when the calamity erupted. "Is this the terrifying creature you spoke of?" a powerful demon beside the three monsters asked in surprise. "Demon Lord, how do you feel?" the three monsters asked as they traveled. "I feel an overwhelming sense of powerlessness. This terrifying creature is stronger than us all. I thought you were overreacting earlier, but now it seems your surprise was a bit too little," the Demon Lord said solemnly. The three ghosts were shocked to hear this. Even the Demon Lord said so? You must know that in ancient times, the Demon Lord had personally killed a Void Realm expert in the present world, a peak Void Realm being, even a half-step Void Deo being. You don't need to worry too much. I comprehended a secret technique in that hellish place. Using the secret technique might be able to fight that terrifying creature and buy some time. You should wake up the others as soon as possible. After saying that, the Demon Lord rushed towards Li Heng's direction. The three ghosts exchanged glances, nodded, and increased their speed. The Demon Lord's journey was likely to be perilous, and they couldn't waste his sacrifice. At this moment, they were fighting for the underworld. I'm getting teary-eyed. Li Heng looked at the underworld illuminated by the radiant sunlight, where demons and monsters vanished instantly under the sun's rays. He sensed the source energy in his mind rapidly increasing and smiled slightly. However, he still felt the efficiency was too slow. After thinking for a moment, he decided to go all out. With a thought, the physical properties of the sun within the great sun Dharma image emerged, granting it infinite mass. Along with this came an incomparably terrifying gravitational pull, capable of distorting the heavens and earth. Li Heng, high above, smiled slightly. Then, let the underworld collapse. Chapter 356 The Power of Gravity. Gravity, one of the four fundamental forces of the physical universe. At this moment, it revealed its terror in a completely different world. First, matter. Soil, flowers, trees, refined iron, ore, everything was torn apart. The earth cracked, mountains crumbled, and everything collapsed. Demons and monsters with tangible bodies began to twist under the influence of gravity, their flesh and blood compressed towards the center. Then came the rules, the soul. Although gravity acts on matter, when it reaches its extreme, it can still distort space-time. So at this moment, with a snap, the laws and rules, the chains of order of the underworld, broke. Souls, ghostly realms, these non-material things also could not escape this calamity. Some succumbed to the pressure of gravity and collapsed directly, while others, though able to resist, began to twist. Terrifying gravity was distorting everything in reality. Of course, it was a physical distortion. Those demons and monsters far away, not completely captured by gravity, or still able to barely resist it, were utterly shocked by what they saw. This was simply a cataclysmic disaster. But what exactly happened? What was this terrifying power? This power was completely unfamiliar, yet it seemed remarkably similar to the power of the Earth's veins deep within. Moreover, they could clearly sense this terrifying power. It was extremely pure, devoid of any inherent characteristics. A single strand of it would be utterly harmless. But once condensed, it became vast and pure to the extreme, capable of such world-destroying power. Seeing this, Heng sensed his own source power rapidly increasing and nodded in satisfaction. This level of gravity was unexpectedly effective against these miscellaneous soldiers. He had just considered whether he could cause the great sun Dharma image to collapse to its limit, forming a black hole to devour the entire underworld. However, this idea was immediately rejected by his spiritual intuition, because it was too dangerous. Leaving aside whether he could do it with his current strength, even if he could, Heng felt that unless he reached the creation realm, he absolutely could not do it. The true terror of a black hole lies not in its gravity, but in its depths, an infinitely large yet infinitely small singularity, a point where all laws break down, an indescribable anomaly. He couldn't fathom what would happen if such an illogical singularity appeared in this non-physical universe. It would be laughable if a black hole, influenced by unique variables like spiritual energy, demonic energy, or monster energy, elements absent in the physical universe, suddenly gained sentience, creating a black hole spirit. Especially if this black hole spirit could utilize the singularity. Demon, prepare to die. A furious roar echoed from afar, and a figure appeared, radiating an aura surpassing even the celestial, attempting to stabilize the underworld affected by gravity while simultaneously unleashing the power of heaven and earth upon Heng. Heng's expression was subtle. A demon? He was actually being strangely called a demon by the demons of the underworld? This felt quite bizarre. Especially when he saw the figure attacking him surrounded by overwhelming demonic energy, he was speechless. A supreme demon dared to call him a demon? The demon lord regretted it now. The closer he got to Heng, the more he sensed Heng's terror. His body and even his true spirit trembled instinctively. If he hadn't forcibly suppressed it with his willpower, he probably would have already fled. He had never seen an opponent of this level before. He even doubted that even if he unleashed his full power of secret techniques, burning everything within himself, all traces of past, present, and future time and space, he might still be no match for this terrifying being. He regretted his boastful words earlier. At this moment, he wanted to run away. But he couldn't run away. It wasn't that he couldn't save face. On the contrary, he felt that face was a useless thing. It was precisely because he was willing to lose face that he had survived until now, and even earned the title of Demon Lord. There had been many who were more capable than him before. But they died because they couldn't let go of face. So why wasn't he running away now? Because cold sweat poured down the Demon Lord's forehead. He sensed that he was being locked onto by a terrifying aura from afar. He had used many escape techniques, but none of them could escape the lock of this aura. So, he had to fight desperately. Gritting his teeth, he sent out his divine thoughts, urging the three ghosts, Pin, Yato, and Gu, to hurry up, or they would have to collect his corpse. Then, he swiftly used the desperate secret technique he had obtained from the ghostly place. With a thud, his entire body burst into flames. Flesh and blood burned, soul burned, true spirit burned, even traces of his past and possibilities of his future began to burn. His aura surged, reaching its zenith, instantly breaking through the void-deo realm he had so desperately sought. The demon lord felt boundless power surging within him, capable of shattering mountains and rivers and overturning heaven and earth with a mere gesture. He was almost obliterated from the great Deo. In that instant, he gained confidence. He charged towards Li Heng. Li Heng raised an eyebrow, looking at the demon lord, whose entire body was ablaze, somewhat surprised. This was undoubtedly a disparate secret technique, but it was very similar to the one Zhuan Xianji had used before. The only difference was that Zhuan Xianji burned everything, while this demonic weirdness had preserved the present, preventing him from being completely driven to the brink of despair. Could there be some connection between them? Or rather, where did these secret techniques come from? To be honest, these secret techniques are outrageous, completely unlike anything one could possess in the mortal or underworld realms, even if it comes at the cost of one's own reputation to break through a major realm. Think about it. If a Void Heaven realm cultivator can break through to the Void Deo realm by risking their life, what about a Void Deo realm cultivator who breaks through normally? Can the Void Deo realm continue to bully the Void Heaven realm? Do they really think the gap between major realms can be crossed so easily? The three demons, poor, desolate, and lonely, who were constantly awakening other Void Heaven realm demons and strange beings to gather their forces to deal with the great demon Li Heng, were taken aback by what they saw. They hadn't expected the demon lord to have such methods. For a moment, they felt even more hope. Perhaps with the demon lord's current overwhelming combat power, they could successfully entangle this terrifying being, or even confront him head-on? A glint flashed in poor demon's eyes as a thought arose. Could it be that these guys who entered this ghostly place also possessed a secret technique like him? Facing the demon lord's earth-shattering attack, Li Heng remained motionless, standing firmly in place, observing the underworld being destroyed by gravity, and comprehending the world-destroying intent within. The demon lord was also deeply puzzled. This person showed no reaction to an attack of his level. Was he paralyzed with fear? Or did he simply not care about him? But that was impossible. He was now of the Void Deo realm. Even if this person was strong, he would have to confront him head-on. He hesitated, wondering whether to attack directly. But when he felt the immense power within him, he regained his confidence. Forget it, he thought, I'm at the Void Deo realm now. Even if it's a trap, I won't die for now. I'll attack and try. Then, I'll die trying. The demon lord's attack reached Li Heng, who didn't even look at it. He extended a finger and flicked it lightly. The terrifying attack, along with the demon lord's indestructible body, was instantly shattered. The rules collapsed, and the body turned into a bloody mist. Where did these flies come from? Li Heng said calmly, his voice echoing through the underworld. Chapter 357 Changes in Source Power. Without the slightest surprise, a single finger strike annihilated the demon lord. His body, soul, and true spirit were all destroyed in that flick, leaving him utterly lifeless. This was not surprising. The gap widened with each higher realm, especially for someone at Li Heng's level. Even though Li Heng hadn't yet reached the creation realm, or even considered a half-step creation realm cultivator, merely possessing the level of creation elements and a small amount of creation-level power, dealing with a pseudo-Void Deo cultivator who had forcibly broken through using secret techniques? It was utterly effortless, a casual annihilation. The increased source power in his mind confirmed this, though it only added 8 million, falling short of the 10 million source power threshold for a true Void Deo realm. Many demons and monsters of the underworld witnessed this scene. They fell silent. Many recognized the demon lord's identity, a supreme demon who had possessed unparalleled killing power since ancient times, having slain terrifyingly powerful beings of the present world, and standing above even the heavenly demons and monsters. Therefore, they actually held high hopes for the demon lord, hoping that he could rival Li Heng, or even suppress him, letting him know the true power of the underworld. But now, those hopes were shattered. They simply couldn't imagine what level Li Heng was at. To kill the demon lord, this supreme demon, with a flick of his finger was simply unbelievable. They had initially thought this terrifying being was a powerful being in the mortal world, but now it seemed impossible. How could the mortal world possibly give birth to such a terrifying existence? Could this be a great terror from beyond the great void? Countless demons and monsters were bewildered. Most had even chosen to close their eyes and accept their fate. It was like humans on Earth suddenly hearing on the radio that the sun had exploded 3 minutes ago. What could they do? They could only quietly await death. At this moment, the three demons, poor, lonely, and desolate, had awakened all the sleeping or self-sealed demons and monsters in the underworld, along with some who were not asleep, totaling 15. Of course, now only 14 remained. The demon lord, whom they had previously awakened, was now dead. After waking everyone, they were initially quite satisfied. After all, as long as they used the secret method to awaken the sleeping monster in the sky and then swarmed it, they could surely wear down this terrifying creature. Some of the more optimistic ones didn't even see this as a calamity for them or the underworld, but rather as an opportunity, a chance to glimpse the path forward without having to enter that hellish place. But now it seems they were overly optimistic. These true pinnacles of the underworld, the demons and monsters of the void realm, fell silent, unsure of what to do. The power of this terrifying creature seemed to far exceed their imagination. Kyung-Gui was now filled with regret. Could they really handle such a terrifying creature? Even if they did awaken the monster in the sky, were they sure they wouldn't be instantly killed by this terrifying creature? They probably didn't even have the chance to wear down its power. Now he felt that Kyung-Gui's suggestion was very far-sighted. He could have simply escaped to the great void and tried his luck. With a bit of luck, he wouldn't have died there. Why stay in the underworld facing annihilation? What do we do now? A strange being surrounded by spirits spoke. He was the Soul Master, and he was the one who created the road to the underworld. Perhaps we can summon the Abyss Sea. There are monsters there too. As you know, there's an abyss there, and who knows how many monsters live within it. A demon covered in scales said. He was the Demon Master. He was the one who created the suspended mountain. Don't forget, we can't even find that abyss. We can't be sure if it exists. Even if it does, I seriously doubt it truly exists in the underworld. At most, it's just an interface, a node, and I don't think it will be of much use. A puppet-like figure said calmly. He was the puppet master. Heng had previously encountered a strange demon from Puppet City, which was his legacy. Then why don't we escape to that hellhole? A constantly writhing mountain of flesh said slowly. He was the Flesh Master. All forces and things related to flesh and blood in the underworld originated from him. The demon from the flesh cave that Heng had previously encountered was his descendant. This suggestion is suicidal. Don't forget why you're still in the underworld, isn't it because you all saw the danger of that hellish place? Besides, those terrifying creatures might be monitoring that place. Kyung-Gui spoke up coldly. He realized that this large group of ghosts all wanted to run. But would running solve the problem? No. Although he had just thought of running away. How? Then tell me what you can do. You were so excited to wake us up just now, how come you have no solution now? The Soul Lord, the Demon Lord, and the other ghosts sneered. We can only fight to the death, we can't run away. Kyung-Gui said calmly. Are you looking for death? Fight to the death? The other demons and ghosts smiled disdainfully. Why were they able to survive until now, even breaking through to the heavenly ghost and heavenly demon levels and reaching the void heaven? Wasn't it because they never fought to the death? Those who fought to the death died long ago. I know you old fogies all have trump cards. Let me reveal mine first. I once obtained a secret technique in a ghostly place that can awaken the sleeping monster in the sky and simultaneously empower it. No matter how strong this terrifying creature is, it's at most on the same level as that monster. Once I use this secret technique to empower it, it can definitely contend with this terrifying creature for a while. Kyung-Gui said slowly. He didn't know if what he said was an exaggeration now, but he knew he had to say it. It was a reassurance. How? The mighty underworld heaven is being called a monster by you. It seems you've forgotten the sacrifices the underworld heaven made? However, I do have a secret treasure here that can be used to seal the path. The Soul Master of the Yellow Springs Road sneered. With such an opening, faced with this terrifying life or death crisis, these old ghosts and demons no longer concealed themselves and revealed their trump cards. Some were cursed treasures, others were sublimation techniques. However, these trump cards all had one thing in common, they all came from that ghostly place, the true realm rift whose true name cannot be spoken. These demons and monsters at the void realm also realized something was amiss, but with their lives hanging in the balance, they couldn't afford to worry about such things. They tacitly agreed to temporarily ignore the problem. According to calculations, with so many secrets and treasures piled up, combined with the power of that monster in the sky and the home field advantage of the underworld itself, it might be able to unleash power surpassing the Void Deo realm, Kyunga slowly said. The other demons and monsters also brightened up. They had also calculated it, and the power of that unleashed power was indeed unimaginable, even capable of truly destroying the underworld. This undoubtedly exceeded the limits of the Voidale realm. Then what are we waiting for? Let's act. The monsters looked up at the sky, at the sleeping underworld heaven that had become a monster. On Li Heng's side, he silently watched the entire underworld slowly collapse under the gravity of the great Sun Dharma image, without taking any unnecessary action, because now he was the force of the universe, and no one could escape its crushing power. His source power was also rapidly increasing, reaching a terrifying number. After reaching this terrifying number, he discovered that his source power seemed to have undergone a new change, seemingly some kind of sublimation. Before he could even ponder what was happening, he sensed something and looked up at the heavens. Oh, so the heaven of the underworld had awakened. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 358 Secret Technique Sublimation. After such a long period of corruption and erosion, the heaven of the underworld is now undoubtedly a monster. Upon awakening, it opened its eyes, its gaze sweeping down from the heavens, surveying the crumbling land of the underworld, instantly locking onto Li Heng, the uninvited guest, and revealing its fury. This fury wasn't for Li Heng's destruction of the underworld, but for Li Heng's premature entry into its hunting grounds and the harvesting of its prey. Roar. The heaven of the underworld roared, and wherever the sound waves passed, mountains, rivers, trees, everything, began to distort, corrupt, and twist, turning into writhing, rotting flesh and blood. Li Heng remained unmoved, his great Sun Dharma form continuing its steady output. Whether uncorrupted or already corrupted, everything was to collapse under the pure force of gravity. The heaven of the underworld moved. He stood up, and with a crack, the heavens supporting him shattered, and the monster landed steadily on the underworld, causing a massive earthquake. Li Heng looked at the monster, his brows slightly raised. He had thought that even if the underworld's heavens corrupted into monsters, it would only be a conceptual matter. But he hadn't expected that after truly becoming a monster, the underworld's heavens would still possess a physical body. Of course, the powers of the underworld's heavens remained. Li Heng could clearly sense that the laws of the underworld revolved around this monster, submitting to it, and then being influenced by it, thus undergoing distortion and corruption. Now, many demons and monsters had been influenced by it, turning into similar monsters, with an indescribable meaning. If Li Heng hadn't intervened in the mortal world to prevent the mortal world's heavens from returning to their peak, the mortal world would have suffered the same fate. In the shadows, the demons and monsters at the Void Realm were all surprised. Although they knew that awakening this monster would bring irreversible changes to the underworld, they hadn't expected the changes to be so drastic. If nothing unexpected happened, the underworld would be finished, unable to return to its former state, beyond saving. However, they weren't too concerned. After all, they were all Void Realm experts, faintly surpassing the heavens and earth. As long as they didn't directly encounter the mysterious pollution brought by the inexplicable calamity, they would remain safe. Just as Lone Ghost and Yahoo Ghost had said before. Corruption is corruption, distortion is distortion. As demons and monsters, what were they afraid of? We can deal with the changes in the present world later. Right now, we must eliminate this terrifying creature, otherwise the underworld will be completely destroyed, and we will also be detected by that terrifying creature, putting our lives in danger. Kyung Gui spoke, and the demons and monsters nodded. They would first use the sublimation technique, paying a certain price to increase their strength to a higher level. Then, they would use Kyung Gui's secret technique to empower themselves and the power summoned from the darkness onto the monster in the underworld, allowing it to advance even further. Then, using the symbiotic secret technique, he could establish a connection with the monster, enabling a certain degree of communication and even a power exchange. This would allow him to gather all their power together, and then unleash their respective strange secret techniques and treasures, unleashing power surpassing the Voidale realm. This was equivalent to the entire Yin world's resources being used. He refused to believe they couldn't deal with this terrifying creature. However, at this moment, Li Heng flicked his finger, and a ray of sunlight flew from his fingertip, striking the monster from the Yin world. The monster's body was instantly shattered. This was unsurprising, it was that easy. He had essentially mastered a creation factor, making defeating a Voidale realm monster easier than an adult beating a child. However, this monster seemed to be incredibly tough. The moment Li Heng shattered it, the surrounding laws and rules of heaven and earth surged towards it, reconstructing its body. Li Heng wasn't surprised. This monster, transformed from a realm of heaven, possessed an incredibly profound foundation. Moreover, this was the underworld, its home turf. It wasn't surprising that it possessed a resurrection cheat. At this moment, the Void Realm monsters were terrified, breaking out in a cold sweat. What had just happened? This monster was blasted apart by this terrifying being with a flick of its finger? Fortunately, the monster's foundation was deep, otherwise, it would have suffered the same fate as the Demon Lord. Just how high was this terrifying being's cultivation? They were incredulous. We can't waste any more time. Use our secret techniques. Kai Gui gritted his teeth and hurriedly said. Even if the monster of the underworld could resurrect, it couldn't resurrect indefinitely. If they delayed any longer, they might be completely annihilated by this terrifying being. Then they would completely lose their chance to turn the tide. So they no longer hesitated, using their secret techniques and fighting desperately. Li Heng planned to flick his finger again. He wanted to see how many times this underworld monster could resurrect, and also let him see the foundation of this underworld. After all, he had never underestimated the underworld. Despite his current boundless divine power and world-destroying might, in terms of sheer size, he is far inferior to the underworld, or more broadly, to a complete world. It's like comparing a planet to a planet-destroying being. While the latter might be able to annihilate a planet through various methods, his own mass is generally far less than that of the planet. Therefore, Li Heng eagerly anticipated the surprises the underworld might bring. The stronger the underworld, the more source power he could harvest. Sure enough, just as he was about to make his move, he discovered that the monster seemed to be infused with multiple forces, its aura surging terrifyingly and steadily. It was now approaching the peak of the Voidale realm. In fact, the monster in the underworld was also puzzled. Although it no longer possessed complete intelligence, it vaguely sensed over a dozen different forces flowing into its body. These forces weren't damaging its body but rather helping it grow stronger. If it couldn't understand, it wouldn't bother trying. So, the monster roared joyfully, accepting these forces without resistance, completely unaware that some of its own power was flowing out of its body. After all, it was just a drop in the ocean. In the shadows, these Void Realm monsters, or rather, Voidale Realm monsters, were overjoyed. Through the sublimation of the sublimation secret technique and their symbiosis with this monster, they had gained the strength of the Voidale realm. At this moment, this monster, also blessed by various factors, was about to surpass the limits of the Voidale realm, possessing boundless power. And because of their symbiotic relationship, it would in turn further strengthen their power. The monster's aura surged, causing the strength of the demons and monsters hiding in the shadows to rise accordingly. Finally, under Li Heng's watchful gaze, the monster broke through its limits, surpassing the Voidale realm and reaching a level involving creation factors. Nothing in the world could harm this monster. And those demons and monsters also reached the peak of the Voidale realm. These Voidale realm demons and monsters were completely driven mad. This was the power they had dreamed of possessing, but unexpectedly, it had been realized by the secret technique they had obtained from the Ghost Land. Now, thinking about it, perhaps they had been too cautious? He should continue to seek opportunities in the Ghost Land. Overjoyed, they decided they absolutely had to go to that haunted place afterward, perhaps to obtain an even more extraordinary opportunity that would allow them to truly reach the Void Realm. Having made this decision, they sensed the surging power within them, burst into laughter, and appeared together in the underworld, beside the monster known as the Heaven of the Underworld, within Li Heng's sight. Li Heng nodded and smiled. It seemed they were all present. He could begin the actual harvest. Chapter 359 Golden Source. The underworld was on the verge of collapse and shattering. Countless demons and monsters were filled with despair. This world-destroying power was simply beyond their resistance. No matter what insidious methods they employed, they would be torn apart by this pure gravity. As for the higher-ups of the underworld, those celestial monsters and demons, they could temporarily resist the power of gravity and the corruption and distortion emanating from the monsters of the underworld. However, they knew the underworld was truly doomed, and they had to escape. Yet, when they used all their means to reach the barrier between heaven and earth in the underworld, they found that the barrier had suddenly become incredibly solid, and they could not break through it no matter what they did. They were trapped. Instantly, these celestial monsters and demons fell into despair. What on earth had happened? Why was there no warning of such a catastrophe? It came so suddenly. At this moment, they were all back to their former weakness. Li Heng naturally knew that these celestial monsters and demons wanted to escape. However, the underworld was his hunting ground, and the demons and monsters within it were his prey. As a qualified hunter, how could he tolerate these demons and monsters escaping? Therefore, he had already used the power of the Earth Dharma form to suppress the void and seal off the entire mortal world. Not to mention celestial ghosts and demons, even those at the void realm couldn't escape. This also isolated the pollution brought by the awakening of the monsters of the underworld, preventing that polluting power from crossing the void and affecting the mortal world opposite. Opposite Li Heng, those demons and monsters who had already reached the void Dao realm were shocked to see the celestial ghosts and demons fail to break through, and a sense of relief rose in their hearts. This terrifying creature was so ruthless. It had actually sealed off the entire underworld. Fortunately, they hadn't harbored any illusions, otherwise, even if they wanted to escape, they wouldn't have been able to, and would have wasted time, truly being wiped out by this terrifying creature. 1 monster, 14 demons and monsters. Li Heng sighed and shook his head. Too few. Hearing these words, the demons and monsters couldn't help but become angry. Too few? Did they look down on them? Now they'd show them what the underworld's true strength was. Without further ado, they charged towards Li Heng. For instance, the 3 demons, poor, desolate, and lonely, joined forces, unleashing their respective negative energies, seemingly the very source of all evil in the world. The power of poor aimed to condemn Li Heng to eternal poverty, stripping him of everything. The power of desolate aimed to bring him calamity and premature death. The power of loneliness aimed to leave him forever alone. Besides these 3 demons, other monsters and monsters also went all out, utilizing the secret treasures and techniques they had obtained in that hellish place. For example, the Soul Master who created the Yellow Springs Road, with a thought, conjured a vast, unfathomable river of souls, stretching for thousands of miles, composed entirely of spirits. Within it, vengeful spirits struggled and ferocious souls roared, surging towards Li Heng, intending to obliterate him and trap him forever within the river of souls. Simultaneously, a seal appeared beside him. Engraved with a character for seal, its aura both ethereal and eerie, transforming into a terrifying sealing force that suppressed Li Heng. This was precisely the secret treasure the Soul Lord had obtained in that hellish place. The Demon Lord, with overwhelming ferocity, manifested his true form, covered in black scales, his blood aura sweeping across thousands of miles, surrounded by countless vengeful spirits of humans, bringing with him an indescribable, God-slaying, and immortal killing aura. The void could not withstand it and shattered. The puppet lord's methods were mysterious and unpredictable, invisible waves rippling outwards, the surrounding world, laws, and order all becoming his puppets, controlled by him to attack Li Heng. At the same time, there was even a strange force attempting to erode Li Heng, lurking in his flesh and blood, deep within his soul light. It seemed to want to turn Li Heng into a puppet. The Flesh Lord was indescribable, dividing pieces of flesh from his vast and boundless mountain of flesh, infecting the surroundings, evolving into a world of flesh and blood, attempting to envelop Li Heng, devour and digest him. Judging from the strange actions of these demons, they were indeed worthy of being the true pinnacle of the underworld, each qualified to stand at the top of the underworld's food chain. Even if just one of them went to the mortal world, they could unleash world-destroying power. However, they encountered Li Heng, a being, neither belonging to the underworld nor the present, arriving from beyond time and space, transcending this stage of story, as unreasonable and akin to this inexplicable calamity, a deus ex machina. Faced with this overwhelming onslaught, Li Heng merely pointed a finger. Like a dimensional attack. Under this seemingly ordinary finger, the vast river of souls was instantly shattered, its souls instantly breaking into countless beams of light that drifted towards the underworld. The sealing seal, though not broken, was sent flying backward. The true form, capable of tearing space and destroying heaven and earth, was also shattered by a single finger. The puppet master attempting to control Li Heng suffered a backlash, its body nearly exploding. The flesh master's world of blood and flesh was also completely rotten, reduced to minced meat. Furthermore, the strange methods of other demons at the Void Dao realm were all shattered by Li Heng's finger, like fleeting fireworks. You are too powerless, Li Heng shook his head in disappointment. Is this the foundation of the underworld? Too pathetic. These demons and monsters suppressed the backlash they were suffering, their expressions grim. In this clash, they had given their all, yet their attacks were shattered by a single finger. Just what level of existence was this terrifying creature? At this moment, the monster of the underworld finally understood the purpose of the dozen or so small insects beside him. They were there to help him. Good. In a state of bewildered joy, the monster attacked Li Heng again. Seeing this, Kai Gui roared with delight. Attack again. Cooperate with heaven to wear him down. The demons and monsters beside him seized the opportunity, assisting the monster of the underworld in launching an attack on Li Heng, not seeking to inflict effective damage, but only to continuously deplete Li Heng's power. Then, in the following clashes, the hearts of these demons and monsters sank. They seemed to realize that this terrifying creature didn't take them seriously at all, and their repeated attacks had been easily blocked. And this terrifying creature remained remarkably relaxed. Could they really wear down this terrifying creature? Suddenly, these demons and monsters were somewhat bewildered. Li Heng wasn't in a hurry. He was currently undertaking a true act of world-destroying destruction, reaping the demons and monsters of the entire underworld, and the source power he obtained was an incredibly terrifying amount. Compared to this, the source power contained in these Voideo realm demons and monsters and the monsters of the underworld was only a small amount. For example, right now, he possessed nearly 10 billion source power. Moreover, seemingly because his source power was so vast, the changes in the source power were becoming increasingly obvious, with some beginning to condense together. This was what deserved his attention. Suddenly, he noticed a faint, golden point of light slowly emerging within this vast amount of source power. Sensing it slightly, Li Heng's expression turned strange. A source point? A golden source point? Chapter 360 Jade Dragon Soars Across Heaven. Li Heng sensed that this product called the Golden Source Point was extremely mysterious, seemingly a sublimation of source power. However, he was also puzzled. What exactly had been sublimated? After all, theoretically, source power could do everything. If source power could do everything, then what was the value of this Golden Source Point? Showing it to others sounded impressive, but he could also sense that the name Golden Source Point was merely his subconscious perception. If he wanted, he could easily change it to something else, even something like Ampere. He couldn't understand it. Moreover, he discovered that even with nearly 10 billion units of source power, this Golden Source Point hadn't successfully condensed. It remained in a vague, floating state, still in its gestation stage. This made him even more curious. If 10 billion units of source power couldn't condense it successfully, how much would it take? What function would a successfully condensed Golden Source Point have? Following the logic of you get what you pay for, it should be very powerful. Li Heng decided not to stop the condensation process. He wanted to see what use this Golden Source Point was. However, this meant he would have to harvest it faster. Snapping out of his reverie, Li Heng smiled as he looked at the group of demons and monsters opposite him, as well as the Yin World monster, and slowly spoke. Do you have any other tricks up your sleeve? If this is all the Yin World has to offer, then we'll have to send you on your way. His voice resounded throughout the Yin World, his words indifferent and ruthless. The reason he had allowed this monster and these demons and monsters to live until now was actually for the sake of maximizing profits, making them stronger so that he could harvest more source power. But now, these demons and monsters seemed unable to grow stronger. In that case, what use were they? The expressions of these Voideo realm demons and monsters turned gloomy. They were being treated like fish on a chopping board, completely at their mercy, yet they were so arrogant. But the next moment, they sadly realized that this was indeed the case. They were indeed fish on a chopping board, and even if they fought desperately, they couldn't even half kill this terrifying creature. We can't hesitate any longer, let's use our last resort. Kai Gui gritted his teeth and transmitted a message to the demons and monsters beside him. He was filled with regret, regretting that he hadn't escaped sooner, but it was too late for any remedies. The other demons wore eerie, solemn expressions. This so-called last resort was actually suicide. Consuming, burning everything they possessed, even consuming the very essence of the underworld itself, to condense an ultimate, sublimated power, which they would then inject into the monster, the heaven of the underworld, to gamble on a final sliver of life. Of course, this sliver of life only existed in theory. In reality, they could only hope for a miracle. But they had no choice. So, their entire bodies, everything they possessed, burst into flames. As the true pinnacle of the underworld, they never lacked the courage to die. After all, if they lacked even this, they wouldn't have been qualified to grow to their current level. Even in death, they would drag this terrifying creature down with them. They roared inwardly. A strange scene unfolded. The 14 demons transformed into torches, continuously burning themselves, their forms fading, the light emanating from them constantly flowing into the heaven of the underworld, causing its power to surge once more. Even in the end, the entire underworld was covered in flames, slowly consumed and burned, eventually transforming into power that flowed into the underworld's body. Li Heng didn't stop it, his expression settled. Why did these secret techniques all seem to burn themselves? And in almost identical forms. Where did they obtain these identical secret techniques? Moreover, he discovered that what truly allowed the underworld's monster to surge in strength again wasn't the power generated by the 14 void realm beings burning themselves and the world around them. Rather, it was a far more vast and terrifying power drawn from the darkness by their self-burning. It was this power that allowed the underworld to reach another level. This seemed to be related to this secret technique. But where did this secret technique come from? Li Heng pondered. Die? The 14 void realm beings completely burned themselves, leaving only an outline, which transformed into an unwilling obsession, influencing the underworld and prompting Li Heng to attack. The monster roared and howled. The sound tore through the heavens, the movements shattered the earth, and even continuously impacted the barriers of the underworld. If it weren't for Li Heng's sealing and reinforcement of the world's barriers, this monster's power would have already breached them and leaked into the void. At that time, the mortal world would also suffer some impact. Interesting. Li Heng smiled slightly. He could sense that the monster in the underworld was constantly growing stronger, now reaching the same level as him, essentially having completely controlled the creation factor. Moreover, even at this level, it continued to strengthen. It was about to exceed the limits he could currently handle. But he wasn't a villain who died from talking too much. Since he had just watched those demons and monsters wreak havoc, using various secret methods to improve themselves, he naturally had corresponding means to avoid his own downfall. Therefore, Li Heng stepped forward. His inner source power surged, burning 10 billion units of source power. The second level of the 4 Brahma heavens, Jade Soaring Victory Heaven, opened. Those who ascend to this heaven forget their ingrained habits, and their divine perception becomes wondrous. Li Heng's cultivation suddenly skyrocketed. He directly reached the half-step creation level. What is half-step creation? It's the embryonic form of heaven and earth. Having mastered a complete creation factor, one is qualified to create a world, to split heaven and earth. Li Heng is currently in the stage where he hasn't yet succeeded in splitting heaven and earth, but he's already taken the first step. And the stage is overwhelmingly superior to those who merely control creation factors, a complete and utter domination. To use a somewhat inappropriate analogy, consider creation factors as a planet-destroying cannon. The person controlling the creation factor simply possesses this cannon but doesn't know how to use it. At most, they can use it to smash people because of its advanced materials and durability. But once one reaches the half-step creation level, able to use creation factors to split heaven and earth, it's equivalent to understanding how to use this high-tech weapon. Its power explodes, destroying a star in one shot. Li Heng's cultivation has advanced further, but he sighs somewhat. It really is a case of earning and spending quickly. Opening the first level of the heavenly realm, the Supreme Eternal Harmony Heaven, consumed 10 million units of origin power. Opening the second level, the Jade Soaring Victory Heaven, consumed 1 billion units, a 100-fold difference. This made his scalp tingle. Could the third level require 1,000-fold or even 10,000-fold more origin power? Even if the entire underworld were destroyed, it wouldn't have that much origin power. Sure enough, he sensed the origin power required to open the third level. 10,000 times that of the second level. 10,000 times that of 1 billion, 10 trillion. Li Heng was completely stunned. If the third level required so much origin power, wouldn't a fourth level be an astronomical figure? Although he knew that the higher the realm, the greater the gap, and the more origin power was consumed, and that a higher realm would inevitably crush a lower realm, unlike before when the gap was small enough for cross-realm battles, the principle was still the same. Where was he going to get so much origin power? Wait a minute. Could it be that the golden origin point was used for this kind of situation? Li Heng suddenly calmed down and thought of this. At this moment, The golden origin point hadn't fully formed, it clearly needed even more origin power to condense. He desperately wanted to know the answer, and his gaze involuntarily fell upon the monster from the netherworld. He discovered that this monster had stopped growing stronger, but hadn't reached the level of a half-step creation realm cultivator. It was only slightly stronger than him before, clearly having exhausted its options. Fine, since that's the case, I'll just kill you, Li Heng said calmly. Ahem, a bit of background information. Ampere is the basic unit of electric current in the International System of Units, abbreviated as A. It is named in honor of the French physicist A. Ampere, who proposed the famous Ampere's law in 1820. Chapter 361 The Origin of the World. The monster of the underworld couldn't understand Li Heng's words. However, in its chaotic and frenzied consciousness, it could sense that it had become incredibly powerful, even stronger than the thing before it. It was invincible. With an excited roar, the sonic waves of the collapsing underworld crashed against the barrier of heaven and earth, nearly shattering the seal Li Heng had previously laid, allowing its power and corruption to leak out. This made Li Heng shake his head even more. It seemed it truly couldn't be allowed to remain. He slowly raised his hand, and an invisible great power manifested within it. His palm seemed to have created a vast world, within which the great Dao evolved, and civilizations were born, pressing down on the monster. The monster sensed the threat and roared. A strange, corrupting power began to emanate from its body, attempting to erode and corrupt the world Li Heng had created, transforming it into its own power to suppress Li Heng in return. However, the next moment, the corrupting power was blocked. That strange power, capable of eroding everything, even space-time, capable of mutating and infecting along the timeline, was blocked by the nascent world created by Li Heng. How incredible was this? If that immortal figure were here and witnessed this, they would be utterly astonished, wondering how Li Heng had managed it. After all, even he, the true creator of the world, couldn't do this. Faced with the power of corruption, he could only avoid its sharp edge. Its source power, I added source power. If anyone asked Li Heng, that was the only answer he could give. This power of corruption was incredibly powerful. Time, space, the fate of heaven and earth, cause and effect. It seemed that everything was destined to be eroded and corrupted. Otherwise, the immortals wouldn't have suffered such a crushing defeat. However, even at its highest, it couldn't surpass source power itself. As long as source power was used, this corruption could be blocked. In fact, if Li Heng were willing, he could even expend more source power to devour this mysterious power, but that was unnecessary. Having exhausted all my tricks, let it end here. Li Heng spoke indifferently, judging the final fate of the underworld and this monster of the underworld. His palm pressed down, and the vast world evolved within it. Unable to withstand the pressure, the monster let out a painful roar, its entire body twisting and deforming. Even its bones seemed to creak and break. Finally, it succumbed completely, its body being utterly crushed by Li Heng's palm strike, turning into a bloody mist. However, being a deeply corrupted and mutated monster, even after such a severe blow, it didn't die completely. The snow mist reformed, seemingly trying to take shape again. But it ultimately failed. It became a writhing mass of flesh, its entire body sprouting fleshy buds that twisted and uttered incomprehensible, indescribable murmurs, radiating an extremely strong polluting power to the surrounding world. A death throes. With a thought, Li Heng pushed his great sun dharma form to its limit, achieving ultimate sublimation. The flesh spontaneously combusted without fire, evolving into a great sun true fire approaching the level of creation, burning it. The flesh was scorched by the flames, billowing black smoke rising into the air. The chunk of meat began to shrink and become smaller, until only a small ball of black liquid remained. Boiling continuously under the scorching heat of the great sun true fire, but showing no signs of abating. Clearly, the great sun true fire couldn't destroy this thing. At least not in its current state. So, Li Heng simply added some source power as a catalyst for the great sun true fire. Instantly, the great sun true fire surged violently, directly piercing through the yin world it was covering. At this point, the great sun true fire could no longer even withstand the weight of heaven and earth, completely burning away the pure void, and also completely incinerating the ball of black liquid, annihilating the strange, unwilling obsessions of the demons, and utterly destroying the monster. The sensation of source power arriving appeared in Li Heng's mind. Source power plus 5 billion. Li Heng sighed. In a sense, he had still made a profit, but it was far too little. A monster approaching the half-step creation realm only had so little source power. How long would it take him to earn it? At this moment, there were no longer any living demons or monsters in the underworld, and with the complete demise of the underworld's heaven, this vast underworld was on the verge of destruction. His source power was approaching 1 trillion. This number was terrifying compared to before, but still far, far away from 10 trillion. Just as Li Heng was pondering how to earn a large amount of source power in the future, he suddenly discovered that within this collapsing underworld, some things remained intact. One was the true realm rift, the ghost place. Even though the underworld was about to perish, and the surrounding area had become void, this ghost place remained motionless, quietly suspended in the void, waiting for living beings to enter. However, having witnessed a ghost place's eeriness, Li Heng wasn't surprised. What truly intrigued him was another place, a boundless black ocean, unaffected by the gravity and light of the great sun Dharma image, still perfectly preserved, radiating yin and demonic energy. Was this the Abyss Sea? When he saw this ocean, those 3 words surfaced in his mind, extremely similar to the ghost place, the true realm rift. Just as Li Heng was about to carefully observe this ocean, it gradually blurred and faded away, leaving him no time to capture or observe it before finally disappearing completely. Li Heng pondered this. He had just used his source power to gain some insight into the ocean's origin. This ocean wasn't truly located in the underworld, but rather shared a node or boundary with it. Now that the underworld had been destroyed, the node no longer existed. Hence, its disappearance and retreat. However, he had just managed to capture a wisp of its aura. If he had the opportunity or the leisure in the future, he could explore that ocean and try to understand what it was. He had previously heard that the Abyss Sea concealed abysses. At this moment, Li Heng's source power exceeded 100 billion. But he discovered that the condensation and formation of the golden source point had stopped, and it hadn't even taken shape. It remained vaguely ethereal, seemingly lacking something. Li Heng frowned. What was going on? As he wondered, the underworld began its 10-second countdown to destruction. In the 10th second, matter shattered, collapsed, and condensed at its core. In the 5th second, the laws shattered, nothingness emerged, and the supporting structure collapsed. In the 0th second, the underworld was completely destroyed, leaving only a vast and boundless void. A ball of light appeared before Li Heng, silently floating in the void. Li Heng frowned slightly. He thought for a moment, deciding to expend some source energy to upgrade the appraisal function. He had plenty of source energy now, in an awkward position, not the best, but not the worst, so there was no need to worry about wasting it. Soon, the appraisal results appeared before him. The first thing he saw were 4 words, World Origin. Chapter 362 The Incomplete Underworld. World Origin, a realm, the core of the world, generally appearing only at the beginning or end of the world. It possesses numerous functions and is a supreme divine object. Note, this world origin is incomplete. Li Heng raised an eyebrow. Incomplete? What happened? Could it be that the underworld wasn't completely destroyed? Wait, that's right. The underworld originally split off from the mortal world. Even after so many years of development and refinement, it is still incomplete from a strict definition of its origin. It's understandable that this world origin is incomplete. To make it complete, it would probably need the origin of the mortal world as well, but he wasn't insane and didn't intend to destroy the mortal world, nor was the situation that dire. However, he noticed that when this world origin appeared, the unformed golden source point became restless, seemingly desperately needing this thing and wanting to absorb it. Li Heng's brow relaxed. It seems the formation of the golden source point requires the world origin? After a moment's consideration, he channeled this world origin into the golden source point, allowing it to devour and merge with it. Source power was his true trump card, there was no need to consider that. The golden source point quickly devoured the world origin. It itself transformed from a faintly visible state into a semi-real, semi-illusory entity, just one step away from successful creation, but unfortunately, it couldn't sell that final step. Li Heng couldn't help but shake his head. This was probably due to the incomplete world origin. However, the underworld was already destroyed, and the present world couldn't be destroyed either. Where could he find a world origin? Suddenly, a brilliant idea struck him. He remembered the omnipotent nature of source power. Why not exploit a bug? Use this source power to create a world origin? However, the next moment, he declared the bug exploit a failure. In his perception, Source power could indeed create a world origin, but the amount of source power required was terrifyingly high, far beyond his means. To put it another way, it would be more practical to simply accumulate 10 trillion source power. It seemed he still needed to honestly find another world origin. Heng pondered for a moment. Suddenly, he thought of something. He couldn't touch the world's origin in the present world, but what about that hopeless future? That hopeless future was already a predetermined fate, almost a certainty of reality, so destroying it would likely grant him some of the world's origin. Of course, he wouldn't do anything without certainty. He had plenty of source energy now, wasting a few 100 million wouldn't hurt, since even if he needed a few 100 million, he couldn't accumulate 10 trillion. He directly used his source energy to begin divination, burning a billion units of it, and discovered that destroying that hopeless future would indeed grant him the world's origin. Heng's eyes lit up. He had another reason to go to that hopeless future. The underworld and the present world were actually connected. It was like the earth and the moon. The moon could influence the earth's tides. Therefore, because of the destruction of the underworld, the present world had also undergone certain changes. For example, the concentration of yin energy in the present world suddenly dropped significantly, leaving many powerful beings in the present world bewildered. Moreover, when they discovered that these phenomena weren't limited to one place but existed throughout the entire present world, they exclaimed in disbelief. After all, the mortal world is constantly being polluted and its situation is deteriorating. It's already a miracle that things like yin energy, which are similar to mysterious forces, haven't surged. How could it suddenly decrease? Some truly powerful figures at the top were even more surprised, because they knew that the yin energy in the mortal world was, to some extent, linked to the yin world on the other side. Now, with yin energy decreasing and yang energy increasing, could it be that something is wrong with the yin world? With these questions in mind, some powerful figures came to the void, intending to look at the yin world. Then, they were instantly dumbfounded. Where is the yin world? Where did such a large yin world go? They saw that the place where the yin world should have stood was now empty, returning to the essence of the vast void. After a long while, they came to their senses and looked at each other in bewilderment. What is this? The yin world suddenly disappeared? No, observe carefully, it doesn't seem to have disappeared suddenly. Because even from the vast distance of the void, I can't faintly feel the violent power fluctuations over there. It seems that a great battle has taken place over there. A Void Realm expert said with a solemn expression. His name was Wang Yangming, once one of the half-saints of the 100 Sages Academy. Now, by a stroke of luck, he broke through the final barrier and successfully advanced, becoming the youngest Void Realm expert. Upon hearing this, some of the celestial beings nearby looked puzzled. Does Sage Wang mean that someone waged a great battle there and destroyed the underworld? This is unbelievable, one celestial being said, shaking his head. Theoretically, he should believe Wang Yangming. After all, Wang Yangming was now a Void Realm expert, and would have seen more than he, a celestial being. But Wang Yangming's words were too far-fetched. Could a being really destroy an entire world? And they, so close, only noticed it now? He preferred to believe the underworld had suddenly disappeared. No, Sage Wang is right, said Confucius, the leader of the 10 ancient sages beside him, and the other 9 nodded in agreement. They could see that the underworld hadn't vanished, a great battle had indeed taken place there. Even now, after the battle ended, the lingering power still sent chills down their spines. The celestial being, and even the others, were dumbfounded. Could it be true? A mere Void Realm cultivator might have just been teasing them. But with 10 Void Realm cultivators agreeing, it wasn't a joke, it was highly likely the truth. They weren't qualified to be teased by so many Void Realm cultivators. There was no need. In fact, not only did these celestial beings disbelieve it, but Wang Yangming, who had uttered those words, was also somewhat incredulous. After all, he found it hard to imagine what level of war could cause the underworld to vanish without a trace. Elders, have you noticed anything? Wang Yangming softly asked the 10 ancient sages. The 10 ancient sages shook their heads. It's too clean over there, just a vast void. Logically, even if the world were destroyed, there should be remnants left, Confucius said, somewhat puzzled. But the aura of world destruction lingers. Han Sheng of the legalist school spoke up. Not necessarily. The presence of the aura of world destruction doesn't mean the world has truly destroyed, it might just be a smokescreen, Mo Sheng of the Maoist school objected. For a moment, the 10 ancient sages were in an uproar. It wasn't until Wang Yangming spoke up helplessly, 10 elders, why don't we go and see for ourselves? We can't see anything from so far away. Then, the 10 ancient sages suddenly fell silent. Wang Yangming was surprised. Did he really have that much influence? Unexpectedly, the 10 ancient sages all looked towards the opposite void, but didn't take any action. Wang Yangming was even more puzzled. They had already seen everything they could, what else could they possibly see? Until he also looked over. A figure slowly approached, gradually becoming clearer. It was none other than Li Heng, who had returned. Chapter 363 The Kingdom of Gods. Oh, you're all here. Li Heng smiled and said when he saw everyone. At this moment, whether it was the celestial beings, the ancient sages, or Wang Yangming, they all wore expressions of disbelief. Especially when they sensed the lingering aura of world destruction emanating from Li Heng, their hearts were filled with shock. Could it be that the disappearance of the underworld was related to Li Heng? What's wrong with you all? You look so strange. Li Heng raised an eyebrow and said slowly. They came to their senses, and Kong Sheng spoke first. Fellow Taoist Li, do you know what happened to the underworld? Oh, so that's what you're asking about. It exploded. Li Heng answered casually. Everyone was stunned. Exploded? Such a large underworld just exploded like that, just like that? They wanted to ask more questions, but then they thought of the aura of world destruction and the underworld's disappearance, and fell silent. May I ask, fellow Taoist Li, how did the underworld explode? Kong Sheng was silent for a while before slowly asking. He already had an answer in his heart, but it was somewhat unbelievable, so he hoped Li Heng would answer directly, or perhaps there was another answer? However, what followed confirmed his guess. How else could it have exploded? Of course, I destroyed it. What else? The underworld explodes when it's destroyed, isn't that a matter of course, like a monster dying when it's killed? Li Heng shrugged, indicating it was nothing special. Upon hearing this, everyone fell silent. They had considered many possibilities. For example, the underworld might have escaped, been hidden by an array, or been destroyed by a sudden calamity from the void. These weren't impossible. But among all these possibilities, they believed the possibility of Li Heng destroying the underworld was the smallest. Even though all the evidence pointed to Li Heng. After all, could a living being be powerful enough to destroy heaven and earth? It was unbelievable. And the fact was, it was this smallest possibility. Li Heng destroyed the underworld. They didn't believe Li Heng was deceiving them. Forcing such deception was pointless, so they quickly accepted the fact, though the shock lingered. This incident also gave rise to another speculation, Li Heng's strength. Could it be that this fellow Taoist Li had already advanced further? Had he glimpsed a path they could only dream of? When I destroyed the underworld, I sealed it off, yet you all noticed so quickly. It seems the destruction of the underworld caused some changes in the mortal realm? Li Heng laughed. Sealed off the underworld? Everyone was stunned again. Could it be that not only was the entire underworld destroyed, but all the powerful beings within it were also wiped out? For example, those heavenly demons and monsters, even those void realm cultivators who had lived for several eras? At this moment, they couldn't help but gasp. Although the underworld was only separated from the mortal realm, the extent of the separation was considerable, taking away much of the mortal realm's resources and giving birth to many peerless demons and monsters. But now they were all dead at Li Heng's hands? Not just one step further, but 2 steps further. But let it have its impact. A short, sharp pain is worse than a long, drawn-out one. Now that the underworld is completely destroyed, no more demons or monsters from the underworld will invade the mortal realm. Li Heng's words rang out at just the right moment, confirming this. Everyone snapped out of their daze, took a deep breath, exchanged glances, and then bowed deeply to Li Heng. On behalf of the mortal realm, we thank fellow Taoist Li, Sr., for his great kindness. A few days later, news of the underworld's destruction spread throughout the mortal realm. With a deliberate propaganda and promotion from various forces, Li Heng's power and the name of the Netherworld Emperor resounded throughout the mortal realm. Even the divine kingdoms of the far west had to acknowledge this supreme deity. In the far west of the mortal realm stood a kingdom ruled by gods. Because it was too far from the center of the mortal realm, its fame was obscure, and it even possessed an air of incongruity with the mortal world. Its people were all lambs to the gods, tools for the gods to draw upon their faith. Ironically, even so, The people of this kingdom were far happier than those of other dynasties. While they might lack education and wisdom, they at least lived well. Above their kingdom stood a supreme divine palace, called the Pantheon. At this moment, all the gods were gathered within the Pantheon, awaiting the arrival of their god king. Soon, before the gods, a flash of golden light appeared, and a god radiating golden light pierced through the void. Upon seeing this, the gods bowed and shouted, "We have seen our great god king." The golden light god nodded and spoke loudly. "I presume you all know of the Netherworld Emperor?" The gods nodded. Some held the Netherworld Emperor in high regard, some disdained him, and some were filled with jealousy and malice. But regardless of their attitudes, the Netherworld Emperor was someone they had to face. "Therefore, we should set off and leave this world," the Golden Light God King said indifferently, changing the subject. The gods were startled by his words. "May I ask, Great God King, why is this? Even if that Netherworld Emperor is too powerful, he doesn't conflict with us, does he? We haven't caused any trouble in the mortal world either." The Golden Light God King spoke again. "This world is finished. The appearance of the Netherworld Emperor is merely a last gasp. Why stay here to die? Besides, that Netherworld Emperor has already taken control of the cycle of reincarnation. The souls of us, the lambs raised in captivity, can no longer reach our divine kingdom. Since that's the case, staying here is meaningless." The Golden Light God King's gaze was deep as he made his decision. Little did they know that their words had already reached the ears of Li Heng, who was in the Netherworld, on the other side of time and space. Li Heng looked at a multicolored river of faith above the Netherworld. This river of faith was the manifestation of the faith of the living beings in the mortal world in the Netherworld Emperor. Originally, it was extremely small, not even manifest, but because the Netherworld Emperor's fame had grown, this river of faith had become incredibly large, manifesting and piercing through the Netherworld. Although it was of no use to him. As he gazed at the scenery of the Netherworld, pondering the words of the Golden Light God King, an intrigued expression appeared on his face. No wonder this divine kingdom in the far west seemed so out of place, it even possessed the means to leave the mortal realm and wander the vast void? This divine kingdom was very likely an outsider. However, Li Heng didn't intend to stop them. After all, he truly had no conflict with this divine kingdom. He even considered getting involved, sending a clone or a wisp of divine thought to accompany this divine kingdom out of the mortal realm and see what new discoveries they might make. With this thought, a wisp of divine thought manifested and flew directly towards the western divine kingdom. Having done this, returning to the main point, Li Heng looked deep into the Netherworld, at the Netherworld Emperor's clone extracting the future imprint from the Heavenly Dao book, his eyes gleaming. Suddenly, a flash of light appeared. The future imprint from the Heavenly Dao book had been successfully extracted. Chapter 364 Strange Future. Li Heng appeared before the avatar of the Netherworld Emperor, taking the future mark into his hand. This mark, like a mirror, constantly flashed various images. However, most of these images were filled with distorted and writhing monsters, seemingly depicting that despairing future. Following the causal connections of these images, Li Heng vaguely saw a river of time before him, with a light and shadow of the future appearing at its end, which Li Heng deduced. However, one future mark seemed insufficient. Even with his efforts, it remained somewhat blurry. Li Heng raised an eyebrow slightly, and another future mark floated from his palm. This future mark was formed from the aura that Zhuan Xianji had extracted from that terrifying monster of the future, which he had extracted. His true self hadn't been idle during this time. The two future marks merged, and the images multiplied again, constantly changing, revealing even more new monsters, reflecting the chaotic, decaying, and corrupt scene of that despairing future. At the end of the river of time, the light and shadow of the future gradually became clearer. Li Heng's mind calculated countless times, his spirit breaking through layers of illusion, discarding all falsehoods, until finally, he reached the endpoint and truly saw that hopeless future. He also pinpointed the space-time coordinates of that hopeless future. From the perspective of the river of time, this hopeless future was strange, existing between reality and illusion, like a monster with countless tentacles. These tentacles waved and twisted, constantly connecting to various tributaries of the river of time, capturing possibilities within them, ensuring that no matter how the future might develop, it would inevitably reach this future. Making this future seem like destiny, destined to happen. This scene broadened Li Heng's horizons. But now that he knew the location, how did he get there? Li Heng pondered. After all, even someone as powerful as him couldn't transcend time. He was still a fish in the river of time, perhaps a larger one, but even larger. He wasn't on the other side, not a fisherman. He didn't have the ability to truly cross the river of time, even if this river of time was limited to this world. Rumors say that the river of time in each world is a tributary of the eternal, unchanging mother river of time within the true great void, making it not easily transcended. To travel from the present to the future, one must employ methods to build bridges and pave roads, just as that terrifying monster descended using the bloodline of a noble family as a guide. His deep contemplation wasn't due to lack of methods, quite the opposite. It was because there were too many, making it difficult to choose. For example, directly expending source energy to descend openly. Or borrowing the power of the present world, using it as a base to build a divine bridge across the river of time. But Heng felt he couldn't be too extravagant. Right, there's still a reborn person. Heng's eyes lit up, and he smiled slightly. In the present world, in front of the Crown Prince's residence at the Western Lyre Royal Palace, a beautiful maid with a somewhat revealing figure stood before the tightly closed gates of the Crown Prince's residence, her face filled with confusion. What's going on? Isn't everyone saying that Xiao Hao is a womanizer? She'd been standing there delivering food, and Xiao Hao still hadn't come out? Or did Xiao Hao prefer something else, whips and candles? As she pondered whether to abandon her mission and leave this den of thieves, suddenly, a tall, even imposing, figure appeared before her. The maid was startled, looked up, and quickly bowed respectfully. This servant, Yingzhen, greets your highness. Yingzhen? Hell, I think she's quite foolish. The Western king chuckled, his large hand patting the maid's shoulder. A terrifying force penetrated her skin, affecting every part of her body, instantly immobilizing her. Then, with a loud crack, the door was blasted open by the Western king's fist. He stepped inside, leaving the maid standing like a weathered statue, blown away by the wind into a cloud of sand, finally dissipating completely. You unfilial son, don't be so depressed. They've even sent assassins to kill you. A short while later, the roar of the Western king echoed through the courtyard. Then, with a loud slap, a figure was thrown from the pavilion, landing heavily on the ground, creating a dent 5 or 6 zang in diameter and 5 or 6 meters deep. The figure on the ground was none other than Xiao Hao. The Western king strode up to Xiao Hao. Even after the slap, his anger hadn't subsided. He angrily retorted, if I hadn't come to see you today, you would have died long ago in the arms of a woman. You unfilial son, get up. The Western king grabbed Xiao Hao, who was lying on the ground. Still feeling unsatisfied, he was about to throw a punch. At this moment, Xiao Hao finally couldn't hold back. He weakly raised his hand, pointing to his bruised and swollen face, and hurriedly spoke before the Western king could throw his fist. Father, stop hitting me. I'll die if you keep hitting me. King Zili was taken aback. Looking at Xiao Hao's bruised and swollen face, half of his anger subsided, but he still sneered. So what if I kill you? You unfilial son, ever since that incident, you haven't left the house, spending your days indulging in debauchery. Who else should I hit if not you? At worst, I'll just resurrect you. As a top figure in the mortal world, King Zili was very confident. In fact, he wasn't wrong to hide him. He even needed to hide him harder. Because now Xiao Hao's face was filled with the words retreat, a far cry from the ambitious, world-dominating reborn person he once was. It was like heaven and earth. Father, I'm just doing this because my parents are alive and I shouldn't travel far. Seeing his father's murderous aura, Xiao Hao quickly defended himself. He was just retreating now, he didn't want to die. At least he should enjoy everything before he died, right? Nonsense. That's Confucianism. Strictly speaking, I'm a military strategist. King Zili sneered. Xiao Hao was speechless. It wasn't that he couldn't find a reason to refute it, but rather that he felt it was pointless. After all, his father had the power to physically persuade him, and no one could withstand that. Never mind, father, what brings you here? Xiao Hao said helplessly. He had been indulging in debauchery lately, trying all sorts of outrageous things, and his father hadn't questioned him. Now that he was tired of it, his father had come to him, clearly having something important to discuss. Of course, it's about your life and future. Let me be blunt, your identity as a reincarnated person has been exposed. King Zili's expression turned serious. Xiao Hao was shocked and felt somewhat innocent. He was already crippled. Why would anyone care about him like this? Seeing this, King Zili knew his rebellious son had misunderstood something and continued, "Don't overthink it. It's just that some forces went to great lengths to try and figure out that person's background, and you were accidentally caught in the crossfire. That's all." Xiao Hao was stunned, his heart filled with complex emotions. What was this? Gods fighting, and mortals suffering? Oh, someone's investigating me? Interesting. Li Heng broke through the void and appeared before the two, chuckling. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 365 The Death of the Emperor. The two were shocked at the sight. King Zili quickly recovered, regaining his composure, and respectfully bowed to Li Heng. "Xiao Lisheng greets Senior." Li Heng waved his hand, indicating there was no need for formality, and spoke. "You said some forces are investigating me. What's going on?" he asked curiously. One should know that someone of his level could perceive the world at any time. Anyone who recited his name would be known to him. He should be able to sense someone investigating him. King Zili was also surprised. "Senior, don't you know?" "Of course not." Hearing Li Heng's straightforward answer, King Zili pondered, somewhat surprised. He hesitated for a moment before continuing, "Perhaps we wiped them out too quickly?" With King Zili's explanation, Li Heng roughly understood. It turned out that some reclusive forces living in numerous unbroken small worlds, hearing of the commotion and heavy losses in the mortal realm, had developed a desire to explore the world and re-enter it. However, before they could make any significant moves, they were detected by numerous powerful forces in the mortal realm, who then joined forces to wipe them out. The specific plan was learned from some of the remaining members. After all, what legitimate powerful force would remain hidden? Isn't the mortal world far superior to a small world? The old trick of having a stronger hidden force is practically non-existent. Li Heng pondered for a moment. No wonder he hadn't sensed it. It seemed these hidden forces had just begun investigating Xiao Hao's origins as a reincarnated individual when they were discovered, leaving no time to investigate further, hence the lack of detection. But since he knew, he might as well take a look and resolve the potential threat. With a thought, he followed the causal connections of this matter, grasping the thread of cause and effect, tracing it deeper. Soon, he discovered the causal thread was broken. However, cause and effect is never a single path, but a vast network of cause and effect formed by countless individuals. If one path was broken, he would find another to bypass it. Li Heng intended to do so. However, the next moment, he was surprised to find that all the causal threads leading to the truth of this matter had been severed, or rather, everyone related to the truth was dead, making it impossible for him to investigate. The causes of these deaths were all quite normal. They were all discovered and eliminated by forces in the mortal world, thus interrupting the causal chain. But weren't these deaths a bit too clean? There was definitely something wrong with this. It was deliberate. However, since he had already discovered it, it wouldn't be difficult for him. He used a little source energy to reconnect these causal threads and continued his investigation. Then, he arrived at a very familiar location, Dali, Bijan, Ben County. Li Heng was slightly surprised. It was actually related to this place? However, he thought about it. Ben County did indeed have some unsolved mysteries, such as the previous white mist disaster, and the inexplicable increase in the concentration of yin energy in Ben County. He had never been able to find the true root cause. However, Zuan Wezi of the Ming dynasty had said that the white mist came from the source of the calamity, that ghostly place, the true realm rift. Could Ben County be related to that ghostly place? He continued his investigation. He arrived at the deep void where Ben County was located and saw the same dark, gaping openings he had seen before, resembling spatial rifts and constantly emanating yin energy. Threads of cause and effect extended into those openings. Li Heng pondered. He was somewhat surprised. He had previously thought these openings emanating yin energy were connected to the underworld, but now that the underworld was gone, these openings still emitted yin energy. This was enough to prove that these openings were unrelated to the underworld, or at least not primarily connected. Without much hesitation, Li Heng followed the threads of cause and effect into the yin energy opening. In the blink of an eye, the world changed, and he arrived at an even deeper void filled with yin energy. In this void, he also saw many more openings of yin energy, seemingly connected to the outer void, constantly emanating yin energy. And in the center of this void stood a black rift stretching for countless miles, like a bottomless abyss. Li Heng was silent. It was yet another rift to the true realm. Both the mortal and underworld realms have so-called ghost places, so he could roughly guess that there was more than one rift in the true realm, though they might lead to a common destination. At this moment, he also noticed that the threads of cause and effect had disappeared into the true realm rift, their destination unknown. This phenomenon further puzzled him. Was the mastermind behind this rift in this ghost place? But as far as he knew, the mortality rate in such places was extremely high. To enter this ghost place and remain alive, even able to exert influence and stir up trouble in the mortal realm, exploring the world, undoubtedly required top-tier powerhouses. This reminded him of those void realm experts who had entered this ghost place in the mortal realm before. Don't be fooled by the current scarcity of void realm experts in the mortal realm. That's because the mortal environment is too harsh, the world constantly being eroded and corrupted, a trend even more intense than in the underworld. Those top void realm experts saw no hope. Since waiting meant certain death, they mostly entered ghost places seeking opportunities. Although they haven't returned yet. Li Heng considered this possibility carefully. Could this be a signal of the return of those void realm experts? But that shouldn't be the case. If a signal were to be sent, should it be to notify the major powers of the mortal realm? Many of these void realm experts are the founders of these major powers. Why would they notify those hidden forces to investigate the heavens and earth? Logically, it doesn't make sense. He felt this matter was shrouded in mystery. And yet, this thread of cause and effect had entered the true realm rift, and he was still too weak to continue exploring, as there was no guarantee of survival inside. Li Heng sighed. He'd better use his cheat code. With a thought, his source power ignited, retracing the history of this place. The void here began to change rapidly like light and shadow, constantly recovering, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, until it retraced back to 7 days ago, where a figure appeared. Li Heng was somewhat surprised, because he recognized the figure. It was the Great Ming Emperor. He had originally thought the Great Ming Emperor had died in the cataclysmic destruction of the underworld, but he was still alive? So he must have left the underworld before its destruction. He was lucky. The Great Ming Emperor waved his hand. A demonic army appeared. This was clearly a force Li Heng had recruited and trained again in the underworld after annihilating his yin army. It exuded a powerful aura of demons, monsters, and yin energy, though somewhat disorganized. Open a passage, conquer. The Great Ming Emperor seemed quite spirited at this moment, his voice echoing through the void, immediately ordering his army to move, heading straight for the True Realm Rift. The demonic army responded and charged towards the True Realm Rift. Then, in the next moment, the rift underwent a sudden change. A gaping maw, seemingly capable of swallowing heaven and earth, burst forth from the True Realm Rift, instantly engulfing the demonic army and the Great Ming Emperor. Hell, didn't expect to encounter blood food. The maw burped, chuckling sinisterly. Li Heng, seeing this, had a strange expression. They were dead just like that? Chapter 366 Future Savior. Huh? Something's not right. The giant mouth paused, revealing a complete face. It frowned, looked around with some confusion, and then burst into laughter. So that's it. No wonder there's blood food here. So I escaped. This is definitely a complete world, definitely teeming with blood food. This is my opportunity. The face laughed wildly. But just as it was about to act, it suddenly stopped, muttering to itself, No, I must first investigate what's in this world to avoid being caught off guard. Let me think. Then, the face's eyes glowed, piercing through the void and revealing several small worlds suspended on the outskirts of the mortal realm. These small worlds contained the hidden forces. I've got it. First, I'll note the coordinates, then control the natives of these worlds to help me investigate and see if there's any danger. This kind of thing requires taking advantage of the weak and fearing the strong. I can't be careless. As the face spoke, it smiled sinisterly, and then invisible waves rippled outwards, disappearing into those small worlds and directly taking control of the hidden forces. Then, the face returned to the True Realm Rift. Li Heng silently watched all of this. This was merely a historical illusion, already happened, so he couldn't interfere. Interference would be pointless unless he could truly reverse time at a great cost. But so that's how it is? A sudden calamity, being targeted by something? Perhaps it wasn't a calamity, but there was some reason. After all, the immortal figure had said that the present world had drifted to the lower reaches of the Great Void River, where many strange things could be encountered. Moreover, the present world was constantly deteriorating, corrupting, and mutating, easily attracting such strange things. Now it seemed that this face with its gaping maw was somewhat rational. Although it exuded a strange aura incompatible with order, it was still much better than a pure monster. Li Heng pondered. The matter was now clear. This true realm rift, like the one in the underworld before, had also sprung out strange things. The difference was that what sprung out of the underworld was a lost soul from the present world, the Taoist master of Dragon Tiger Mountain. Meanwhile, this face appeared in the mortal realm, its origins and background unknown, making it even stranger. This face seemed very cautious. Even with power enough to crush the mortal realm, it still chose to control some hidden forces that had never entered the world, helping it to investigate the situation there. After doing this, it even ran back to the true realm rift, not giving Li Heng a chance to strike directly at the heart of the matter. This was troublesome. Because the hidden forces controlled by the face had now been wiped out, this situation might have been noticed by the face, making it aware of the dangers of the mortal realm. Therefore, whether the face should still invade the mortal realm was questionable. Because that face seemed to already know the coordinates of the mortal world, if it didn't appear and invade, it would be a hidden time bomb, very troublesome. Moreover, he was very curious about that face. If he captured it alive, perhaps he could learn some information about the true realm rift from it. After all, it was a rare, strange being with reason. Li Heng pondered for a moment, deciding to have his divine avatar, the Netherworld Emperor, block the area until his main body returned to deal with it, avoiding the situation where he went to block someone's spring only to have his base raided instead. This true realm rift was indeed dangerous, and the true realm deep within it was a perilous place only those at the Void Dao realm were qualified to venture into. He'd wait until he returned from the despairing future and had increased his strength before considering it. Having finalized his plan, Li Heng returned his mind to his main body. At this moment, King Zilai and Xiao Hao, seeing Li Heng standing silently, were somewhat puzzled, unsure of his purpose. However, for various reasons, they dared not speak or ask. So, they too stood there awkwardly. Until Li Heng slowly spoke. "I roughly understand what happened here." King Zilai breathed a sigh of relief, finally speaking. He respectfully asked, "May I ask, Senior, is there any hidden story behind this?" Li Heng glanced at King Zilai and calmly asked, "Of course it exists, but you can't interfere. Just pretend it doesn't exist." After saying this, he looked at the reborn Xiao Hao. To be honest, Li Heng had never seen such an unlucky reborn person, so easily exposed and investigated. Now, Xiao Hao's identity was probably known to many powerful forces, who were trying to win him over or kill him. Winning him over was to obtain information about the future. Killing him was something he couldn't have, and neither could Xiao Hao. "Xiao Hao, you're in a very dangerous situation right now, you're about to die. But I want to give you a chance." Xiao Hao looked blank. He was about to die. How come he didn't know? Could it be that his identity as a reborn person had been exposed? "You unfilial son, nod quickly, it's your honor to be given a chance by your senior." Seeing Xiao Hao's stunned expression again, King Zilai was furious at his lack of ambition and urged him hurriedly, even trying to force Xiao Hao to nod. Now, he couldn't cling to the coattails of the three future saints anymore. It seemed that because of the previous falling out, they couldn't be contacted at all, so he could only turn to Li Heng for help. He's under immense pressure too, bearing the burden of multiple pressures for Xiao Hao, but he can't hold on much longer. For example, not long ago, the patriarch of the greatly royal family emerged from seclusion and debated with him. Fortunately, the greatly royal family has ties to the aristocratic families, and they suffered heavy losses in the previous calamity of the aristocratic family's destruction, losing many powerful figures to barely sever their own ties. Therefore, he can barely withstand the pressure from the royal family now. But besides the greatly royal family, there are other forces. He's almost at his breaking point. This is why he was so angry before, even wanting to kill Xiao Hao to end it all. "May I ask, Senior, what price do I need to pay?" Xiao Hao, being a relatively intelligent person, quickly asked. "Price?" Li Heng's expression became strange. "I ask you, do you want to be a hero?" "No, I don't." That's what Xiao Hao originally wanted to answer. But when he opened his mouth, "I do, Senior." I've always wanted to be a hero. After saying this, Xiao Hao froze. What happened? How could he say such a stupid thing? Heroes have always lived short lives. Isn't becoming a hero just courting death? Until his gaze fell upon Li Heng's enigmatic smile, his heart skipped a beat. And he immediately realized that the situation seemed to leave him with no choice. Xiao Hao will obey senior's orders. He bowed deeply to Li Heng. Li Heng nodded in satisfaction and smiled. That's more like it, the future savior. Chapter 367 Infinite Possibilities. The future savior. Upon hearing this, Xiao Hao was stunned. Was this referring to him? Senior, I think there might be a misunderstanding. He swallowed hard and quickly spoke. Savior, that was quite a title, but he knew his place. With great power comes great responsibility. He knew he couldn't be one. To be one meant death, which was far more terrifying than being a hero. No, I didn't misunderstand. Li Heng laughed. You just said you wanted to be the savior, didn't you? He looked at Xiao Hao, a half-smile playing on his lips. Seeing Li Heng's smile, Xiao Hao felt a jolt, then nodded obediently, his expression solemn and dignified. That's right, I want to be the savior, the hero. That's more like it. Li Heng nodded in satisfaction. In that case, savior, we should set off. Set off? The two were startled by these words, but the next moment, they both considered one possibility. Could this being really be heading to the future? They thought in horror. Just as you think, Li Heng said with a slight smile, observing their reactions. This. King Zilai hesitated. He was clinging to Li Heng to protect Xiao Hao's life and prevent the various powers who knew Xiao Hao's reincarnated identity from kidnapping and killing him. But now Li Heng wanted Xiao Hao to go to the future? Wasn't this a suicide mission? He'd rather die. King Zilai thought resolutely, about to speak. At this moment, he noticed Li Heng looking at him and said leisurely, in exchange, I will help you relieve the pressure from the various powers. Deal. He immediately slammed his hand on the table. King Zilai happily uttered those two words. Xiao Hao, standing beside him, was dumbfounded. His father had sold him out? Sold out was one thing, after all, Xiao Hao knew they couldn't resist Li Heng, but couldn't he at least offer some consolation? At this moment, Xiao Hao heard King Zilai transmit his voice to him. Son, go in peace. I'll miss you. Li Heng watched this scene of fatherly love and filial piety with great interest. He could understand, though. Xiao Hao's reincarnated identity had been exposed, attracting the covetous eyes of many forces. The Western King alone, and even the entire Great Li, couldn't protect Xiao Hao. They might even implicate him. It was better to gamble on a chance of survival and leave Xiao Hao to him. When Li Heng promised to help the Western King alleviate the pressure from various forces and save his life, the Western King was relieved of his last lingering concerns and immediately agreed. A son, after all, he could just create another one. Xiao Hao was now on the verge of tears. He knew how terrifying and hopeless that future was. Living in that era, there was almost no chance of dying peacefully in one's old age. Danger was ever present. Compared to that, this era was practically paradise. But now he had to go back to that hell, a world apart. Life was truly unpredictable. The Western King still had some integrity. Before Li Heng set off, he desperately stuffed numerous life-saving trump cards into Xiao Hao's hands, including as many as 9 life-saving magical treasures. Finally, he even had Xiao Hao, on his behalf, greet his future self. Yes, in that hopeless future, the Western King was still alive. However, Li Heng wasn't surprised. If the Western King had died in that hopeless future before Xiao Hao's rebirth, then Xiao Hao would have had no chance of survival and would have died before even being reborn. With everything prepared, Li Heng activated the divine power he had comprehended from the Salvation Jade Slip, drawing forth the true river of time. The river stretched far and wide, its beginning and end unknown, traversing the entire mortal world. Many powerful figures in the present world were startled upon seeing this. What was going on? Had another great demon invaded Nandu? However, when they sensed Li Heng's aura, they calmed down. Oh, it's this venerable one, senior. Then it's alright. Li Heng gazed downstream along the river of time, precisely pinpointing the coordinates of a hopeless future within the misty, future-bound section, and manifesting its illusory form. He then turned to Xiao Hao, who stood frozen in place, and with a swift movement, extracted the causal concept representing Xiao Hao's reborn identity from the void, scattering it onto the river of time. The causal concept, guided by Li Heng's thoughts, slowly evolved, extending from the present to the future, transforming into a divine bridge that led directly to that hopeless future. Many powerful figures in the present world, watching from afar, were stunned. What was going on? Did he intend to cross the river of time and descend into the future? The powerful figures gasped in astonishment. Especially the 10 ancient saints, who were utterly astonished. They had joined forces, risking everything, to cleverly sneak into this era. Yet now, fellow Taoist Li could easily construct a divine bridge. He could forcibly descend from the present into the future. It was utterly unbelievable. Had fellow Taoist Li become this powerful now? Li Heng ignored the reactions of the powerful figures of the present world, calmly turning to look at Xiao Hao, who stood frozen in place. The time has come, let's go. He stepped onto the divine bridge, and Xiao Hao, as if possessed, followed behind Li Heng, propelled by an invisible force, slowly moving from the present into the future. The two walked on the divine bridge, quickly leaving the present world behind. Now, having left the real present, they entered a virtual future river, filled with countless illusory possibilities. This future river wasn't a straight river, but a vast network of tributaries. Although these tributaries and possibilities were illusory, they still amazed Li Heng, opening his eyes to wonder. He thought to himself, there really is such a future, such possibilities. For example, a tributary nearby to his left had been completely destroyed, the cause of which was simple and brutal. It had been shattered by a large meteorite from the vast void. That was still relatively benign, at least it had some logic. The further a tributary deviates from the main river, the more outrageous and illogical the possibilities become. For example, a tributary further to the left destroyed the present world within it. Though the reason for the destruction was absurd, everyone in that world spoke at the same frequency at a certain moment, creating resonance that directly caused the collapse of the present world. But that's not even the most outrageous. There are even more absurd possibilities. For example, destruction caused by being blocked by excrement. Or, the world dying from sweetness because it loves sweets. However, Li Heng might not have time to observe these absurdities. He discovered that as the divine bridge extended further into the future, it itself became increasingly ethereal and illusory, requiring him to inject power, even source energy, to stabilize it. After all, his cultivation level was limited, he hadn't transcended time and space. Thus, Li Heng lost interest in sightseeing and led Xiao Hao at high speed, quickly arriving at the lower reaches of the future river section, where he truly saw the form of that despairing future. It was indeed a monster filled with tentacles, constantly twisting. At this moment, the tentacle detected a distant tributary, a future possibility, a possibility where the present world was developing well, with several Void Realm experts emerging. However, at this instant, the tentacle probed into the world. The world instantly distorted and corrupted. This monster seemed to be feeding. Chapter 368 A Depth of Water in the Future. Li Heng frowned slightly. This scene was somewhat bizarre. This desperate future wasn't just monstrous in shape, it was a monster in essence, capturing all possibilities of the future and gradually transforming itself into reality. The possibilities of the future were false, ethereal and intangible. But this monster captured these possibilities, extracting truth from the ethereal falsehood, using the false to cultivate truth. He could clearly see that as this possibility was captured and devoured, the entire disparate future became more real, seemingly about to step into the realm of reality. However, did the three future sages know about this? Li Heng estimated it was doubtful. To see this, one would need the ability to observe the entirety of the desperate future, and also to observe it from outside the desperate future, from the perspective of the river of time. If one were to observe from within the desperate future, they would likely be blinded by a single leaf, unable to see the whole mountain, unaware of the truth. There's a saying, the bystander sees more of the game than the player. Considering the three monsters of the future, fear, wickedness, and an unknown, unidentified monster, he suspected that this last monster referred to the desperate future itself. However, if that's the case, how could the first two monsters, fear and evil, be worthy of being mentioned alongside the monster despair future? Moreover, it seems that despair future lacks intelligence. At least not now. Its behavior of seeking other possibilities is probably just an instinctive feeding under the influence of corruption and distortion. In reality, Such behavior is completely unnecessary. Because even if despair future didn't seek other possibilities, as it gradually becomes real, it would still be its destined fate, its inevitable outcome. After all, the real key lies in this inexplicable calamity, this mysterious power. Whether it's the two monsters, fear and evil, or despair future itself, they are all derivatives, byproducts, of this inexplicable calamity, this mysterious power. Therefore, in a sense, Li Heng hasn't yet directly confronted or clashed with that inexplicable calamity, this mysterious power. What he's doing now are just minor frictions. After all, with his current strength, he certainly doesn't have the qualifications. Otherwise, that celestial figure wouldn't have advised Li Heng run. Li Heng's thoughts drifted further and further away, until they reached a certain point where he brought them back to observe this despairing future once more. The monster of the despairing future had finished feeding, its tentacles retracted, and it had entered a silent state, resembling a bubble representing the future. This form was somewhat normal. However, the indescribable murmurs, whispers, and eerie power emanating from the bubble still made onlookers feel a sense of danger, deterring them from approaching. Li Heng sighed. No wonder the celestial figure said this despairing future was very complex. If this despairing future itself was the third monster, that would be fine, but if it wasn't, and the third monster was something else entirely, then it would be extremely troublesome, requiring constant vigilance. Imagine if someone else, unaware of this, only knowing that three monsters existed in the future, had desperately killed them all, until they were completely exhausted. But then another monster appeared. One can only imagine how desperate that situation would be. It's like the brave team fighting tooth and nail, exhausted, to defeat the final boss, only to discover there's another mastermind waiting for them, a series of nested dolls. The unknown is the greatest enemy, a phrase echoed in Li Heng's mind. Currently, the fear and the evil are relatively easy to deal with. Before his strength increased, he could easily defeat the projection of fear and even injure its main body. Now that he has improved, and by a significant margin, even if fear and the evil join forces and take control, Li Heng is confident he can easily defeat them with his main body's intervention. As for the monster from the despairing future, if it lacks intelligence, it's fine. But if it possesses intelligence and interferes with him at some point, it will be troublesome. After all, this is equivalent to the power of an entire era, surpassing heaven and earth in some respects, making it difficult even for him to deal with. Unless he uses his source power. And even if he successfully defeats these three, if the despairing future itself isn't the third monster, he'll still have to contend with a third monster whose existence and strength are unknown. Therefore, in dealing with this situation, one cannot play all their cards immediately, nor can they reveal their hand. Otherwise, they will be extremely vulnerable to the hidden unstable factors, such as being ambushed by a third monster. Li Heng pondered for a moment. He was confident. Even if there really was a third, or even a fourth, or a fifth monster of unknown strength, as long as they were not at the creation realm, he would not be caught off guard. Even if there were creation realm monsters, he could still survive. Moreover, he did not believe that there were really creation realm monsters in this desperate future. If there were, it wouldn't be him who was in a hurry, but the immortal figure who was in the past and occupied the origin of heaven and earth. However, his purpose in coming to this desperate future was not to spend source power, but to earn source power. This desperate future was not worth it. He would not throw away all his source power. Therefore, he had to calculate. For example, he could ask the future savior next to him to help. He smiled slightly and patted Xiao Hao's shoulder with his large hand, bringing him back to his senses. We're almost there. How are you feeling? Xiao Hao was still a little dazed, seemingly not having fully reacted yet. Upon hearing Li Heng's words, Xiao Hao, quite sensibly, quickly replied, reporting to Senior, I am very happy, in a good mood. Hearing Xiao Hao's heartfelt words, Li Heng nodded in satisfaction. Not bad, you are very enlightened. And those who are enlightened are qualified to know the truth. Look ahead, what is that? Following the instruction, Xiao Hao looked ahead in confusion. Then he saw that despairing future, in the form of bubbles. This is the future? Xiao Hao was somewhat surprised and confused. Although he had some cultivation, he wasn't given a dharma aspect, unable to touch the laws of heaven and earth. So when he saw the full picture of this despairing future with his naked eyes, he was somewhat dumbfounded. In fact, if Li Heng hadn't given him a buff, Xiao Hao would have been overwhelmed by information, his brain overloaded. The result would have been either a system crash or an explosion. Take a closer look. Li Heng casually activated the light in Xiao Hao's eyes. Instantly, Xiao Hao's surprised and confused expression disappeared, replaced by terror, his body even trembling instinctively against his will. These are tentacles, tentacles everywhere. Wriggling, sacred, supreme. As Xiao Hao witnessed the true face of this hopeless future, he began to murmur in terror, his words becoming increasingly incomprehensible, escalating into indescribable, incomprehensible ravings. Finally, his body began to mutate, chunks of flesh bulging and writhing, threatening to spread throughout his body. However, Li Heng intervened, suppressing the mutation. He was somewhat surprised, even from such a distance. Right beside him, Li Heng still had the power to harm Xiao Hao. It seemed the mimetic contamination was exceptionally strong and deeply entrenched. Xiao Hao regained his senses, still shaken. He realized what had just happened and felt a wave of fear wash over him. If it weren't for the senior's timely intervention, he would have truly become a monster. "Thank you for your help, senior." He sincerely and respectfully flattered him, ignoring the fact that he had encountered such danger because of Li Heng. He was thinking of his own life, after all. Good, not bad, very high level of awareness. Li Heng was very satisfied and patted Xiao Hao's shoulder forcefully. "Then the organization will assign you a task." Chapter 369 Shelter. Young master, young master, young master. "My lord, the young master is awake." An excited, joyful female voice gradually reached Xiao Hao's ears. He groggily opened his eyes, a crimson light illuminating his vision and gradually bringing his surroundings into focus. Xiao Hao looked around in confusion. A dilapidated wooden hut, damp walls, fungi and moss spreading in the corners, the air thick with spores and extremely murky, dust visible to the naked eye, incredibly oppressive. A beautiful maid stood beside him, looking extremely excited. Yes, he was back. Xiao Hao recalled everything and fell into deep thought. Just then, with a loud bang, the rotten wooden door was kicked open, and a large, middle-aged man with a stubble beard walked in. Looking utterly is a difficult word to translate directly, but it implies a state of being listless, dispirited, or decadent. Upon seeing Xiao Hao, the man immediately became excited. "You're finally awake, kid. Did I warn you not to go out so easily? If it weren't for someone else seeing you by chance, you would have been dead in the mouths of those monsters outside long ago." After the initial excitement, the man was mostly angry. Xiao Hao calmly nodded and spoke softly. "Father, hello." The man was none other than the former king of Zili, the future Xiao Lishan. Xiao Lishan frowned. Having escaped from the monster's jaws, the first thing he did upon waking up was to greet him. This wasn't like that kid's personality. Xiao Hao ignored Xiao Lishan's reaction, still looking around at everything that was both familiar and strange, his heart filled with endless emotions. He had finally returned to this hopeless future. In this hopeless future, the world was distorted, monsters roamed freely, and humans either died or actively embraced pollution to adapt to the changing environment, becoming monsters themselves, or were about to become monsters. However, he was lucky, with a powerful father protecting him, and located deep within a sanctuary where some powerful figures suppressed the monsters, so the degree of mutation wasn't too high. There was hope that he could live to ripe old age without becoming a monster. However, he didn't know what had gotten into him back then. He suddenly ran out of the shelter, encountered a monster, and then inexplicably reborn. And now he'd been thrown back. What was going on? Xiao Hao felt bitter. Moreover, when that senior Li threw him back, he didn't tell him what to do. Just as he was feeling somewhat lost, he suddenly noticed a light screen appearing before his eyes. Savior system loading. Loading successful. Welcome to the system. This system will help you become the future savior and save the world. Main quest now issued. Quest rewards. The words appeared one by one on the virtual light screen, and an emotionless, mechanical synthesized voice rang in his ears. Xiao Hao was instantly dumbfounded. What was going on? Savior system? Could this be Senior Li's doing? Wait, weren't the quest rewards displayed above the life-saving secret techniques and treasures his father had given him? He quickly sensed his body and found that the secret techniques and treasures had all vanished. Xiao Hao fell silent instantly. The mission reward was his own stuff. What was going on? Damn it, was he being taken advantage of? He felt incredibly indignant. You've been acting strangely ever since you woke up, Xiao Lishan said, his expression grave. To be honest, if he hadn't sensed that the boy's soul was still the same, without any strange additions, he would have thought Xiao Hao had been possessed or parasitized. Father, didn't you see? Xiao Hao pointed to the light screen in front of him. See what? Don't play tricks on me, kid. Since you're awake, get up. The monsters have already discovered this place. We need to leave as soon as possible and head to the next safe haven, Xiao Lishan said suspiciously. Xiao Hao fell silent. So this was truly the work of that senior? He sat up straight, his expression grave, and spoke. Father, you might not believe it, but I was reborn in the past, back to before the cataclysmic changes in the world. Xiao Lishan nodded calmly. I certainly don't believe it. With that, he lifted Xiao Hao up with one hand. Let's go, don't be foolish, everything is irreversible. Xiao Lishan carried Xiao Hao out the door like a chick. Outside the despairing future, on the divine bridge that hadn't shattered due to the infusion of source energy into the river of time, Li Heng gazed intently at the despairing future, watching what was happening on Xiao Hao's side. The so-called savior system was indeed his creation, and it did have some useful functions. If used well, Xiao Hao could even rise to become a powerful figure. But he wasn't here to play a protagonist-raising game. So fundamentally, Xiao Hao and the savior system were just bait he had cast out, waiting for the fish to bite. At the same time, Xiao Hao and the savior system could also be used as coordinates for his descent. Once they caught a big fish, he would descend instantly, catch it, and cook it. Before the big fish took the bait, he would only descend in the form of an avatar or divine sense, not his true self, because he wasn't stupid. That despairing future is a monster. For me to enter it would be like a lamb entering a tiger's den, a journey into the monster's belly, increasing the risk along the way. With a thought, Li Heng's mind entered the despairing future. Inside the 9th shelter of the Class B Psi, this place has been discovered again. It's all that brat Xiao Hao's fault. Now there are hardly any shelters left. Since the heavenly change 10 years ago, the situation has become increasingly worse. Isn't that obvious? We are just barely clinging to life. What can we do? We can only hope to die a natural death. I apologize on behalf of this brat and on behalf of you too. Xiao Lishan dragged Xiao Hao to the two celestial realm experts who were talking to each other, and smiled bitterly. Your son is not apologizing for the two of us old men, but for all the humans in the shelter. If he hadn't suddenly run away, would this place have been discovered so easily? One of the celestial realm elders sneered. Sigh, alright, let's not argue now. For old Xiao's sake, why bother with a junior? Besides, we've already planned to relocate to the first-ranked shelter of the B class. Another celestial elder acted as peacemaker. The first-ranked shelter of the B class? Xiao Hao, who had been looking bewildered, suddenly realized. In the despairing future, there were some human refuges used to avoid the abnormal laws of the outside world. They were generally divided into A, B, and C class. The strongest in the C-class shelters were Dharma aspects, while those in the B-class were celestials, and those in the A-class were said to be above celestials. However, because the environment was becoming increasingly harsh, most of the humans in the C-class shelters had either died or turned into monsters, rendering them practically useless. Seniors, is the first-ranked shelter of the B-class really that powerful? Xiao Hao asked curiously. Although there were also first and second-ranked shelters within the B-class shelters, the difference wasn't significant. After all, the strongest among them was only celestials. Was it really worth planning to relocate there so early? Shut your mouth, you have no right to speak. Xiao Lishan frowned and scolded. Old Xiao, don't be so harsh on the juniors. Actually, it's not a secret. The reason we moved there is because there's a saint statue in that character sanctuary. The peacemaker celestial being smiled slightly. Saint statue? Xiao Hao was stunned. At this moment, in the void above the heavens and earth, the three future saints still stood there. However, their condition was not very optimistic. Each of their figures had become somewhat ethereal and indistinct. Alice, this is troublesome. The mark we left among the human race is getting weaker and weaker. They may not even know we exist anymore. That doesn't make sense. Did we leave a statue? The statue can protect the human race. The human race should remember us and even worship us. The middle-aged saint said worriedly. Yes, we can't hold on for much longer. The young saint also began to feel dejected and speechless. Then he spoke in a somewhat frantic manner. "So, was that guy who was shouting about descending into the future just talking nonsense? I haven't descended yet, we haven't sensed anything, there's no way we can sneak back to the present through him." The elderly-looking saint didn't answer. But from the expression on his face, it was clear that he wasn't at peace. He was genuinely questioning his existence. Had he really misjudged him? Was that person really just talking nonsense? Did he actually have no ability to descend into the future? All right, stop shouting, you're making things worse. A soft laugh rang in the ears of the three. Then, Li Heng's figure quietly appeared. Chapter 370 The Spirit of History. So this is what they call a hopeless future? So that's how it is. Li Heng sensed the world of this era, lost in thought. The rules and laws were extremely distorted and corrupted. Unless one actively embraced the pollution, the path of cultivation would be completely severed. This was indeed hopeless. Why are you here? The three saints, old, middle-aged, and young, were shocked. They hadn't expected Li Heng to suddenly appear in this era, beside them, and were even momentarily stunned. Li Heng raised an eyebrow slightly and spoke calmly. "Is it strange that I'm here? Besides, weren't you the ones who wanted me to appear? Now that I'm here, your reaction is truly disappointing." He shook his head, appearing deeply pained. The three saints exchanged bewildered glances. They had already realized that the person before them wasn't an illusion, nor was he a manifestation of those monsters, but a real being. Was it really him? A huge question mark appeared in their minds. This didn't make sense. Even if this person truly had the ability to descend from the present era to the future, he would surely have caused a great commotion. Why hadn't they noticed? And most importantly, they couldn't take the opportunity to sneak into the present. The three felt a sudden pang of despair. "You shouldn't be here." Being top-tier experts, they quickly regained their composure. The elderly man warned Li Heng with a grave expression. "But I am here," Li Heng said calmly. "While there's still time, hurry back to the present. This future is beyond saving," the middle-aged saint chimed in. That's right, everything is irreversible," the young saint added. Li Heng laughed. "You three seem to be in a hurry? Want me to return to the present? Let me think, why would you say such a thing? Could it be that you're trying to sneak into the present?" The three were stunned, their hearts tightening. What was going on? Only the three of them knew about this, right? And this person guessed it correctly? In fact, Li Heng was just making things up, but after observing the reactions of these three future saints, he was somewhat surprised. Could he really have guessed right? "Let me guess why you want to go to the present. Could it be to seek refuge, to escape?" Li Heng's tone was meaningful. After all, the waters of this despairing future are quite deep. Even Li, in his current state, is somewhat vulnerable, let alone the three future saints. Those waters could absolutely engulf them. So what if they are? So what if they aren't? The elderly saint spoke, neither confirming nor denying. Li Heng smiled again upon seeing this. "Your current state seems rather poor. You appear and disappear, your figures floating like phantoms, as if the very foundation of your existence has been destroyed. This situation doesn't seem like something that would happen to ordinary humans. You're not human, are you?" Li Heng's words were startling, yet his tone was certain. Initially, he had indeed been prejudiced, believing that the three future saints were human. After all, they appeared in human form and had consistently protected the future human race. But now, observing them up close, combined with the aura of time emanating from them, and their facial features of old, middle-aged, and young, he was completely certain that these three were not human. At least not human with flesh and blood. The three saints' expressions were somewhat unpleasant. Whether it was because Li Heng had head and nerve, or because he had exposed their true nature. The elderly sage replied coldly, repeating the same question, "So what if I am? So what if I'm not?" "Fellow Taoist, you don't seem to be a human from this world," the middle-aged sage said quietly, seemingly seeing through Li Heng's identity as an outsider. Li Heng was somewhat surprised. Although he hadn't concealed his origins, he never expected to be seen through by these three future sages. Unless source energy enveloped his eyes, his gaze deep and unfathomable, fixed on the three. The three sages were immediately startled. For some reason, they felt as if they had been completely seen through by this person's single glance, with nowhere to hide. What was going on? At this moment, Li Heng withdrew his gaze, revealing a smile. "So that's it. No wonder you know this, no wonder you have the aura of time on you. You are the three historical spirits of the human race, representing the beginning, prosperity, and end of human history. Upon hearing this, the three sages were dumbfounded. What was going on? Could this person really see through their origins? This shouldn't be possible. They couldn't comprehend it. Their origins are hidden deep within history. Even the monsters of the despairing future don't know their origins. How could this person know them at a glance? Heng suddenly understood. The three future sages could identify him as an extraterrestrial visitor, not because of their superior investigative abilities, but because, as spirits of human history, they knew almost everything about humanity, essentially possessing a complete database of human history. However, this database didn't include Heng. It didn't include this unexpected visitor. Through data comparison, he was exposed. No wonder you are so weak now. After all, humanity is now practically extinct. As spirits of human history, your strength will inevitably be weakened, and your foundation for existence will be diminished. Once all the humans in this despairing future die, or the remaining humans forget you, and your traces among humanity completely disappear, that will be your death. Heng calmly stated the predicament faced by the three sages. The birth of these three spirits of history was almost inevitable, a self-preservation measure that emerged when human civilization was on the verge of extinction, solely to save humanity. But this method seems to have a hidden agenda. As the historical spirits of humanity, instead of thinking about fighting the monsters, saving humanity, and saving the world, you want to escape to the present? The three saints finally recovered from their shock. Perhaps because Heng revealed their origins, the three of them were resigned to their fate. The young and impetuous saint sneered and spoke. How, we do want to save them, but can we? Do you know how hopeless this future is, being a newcomer? Can you handle those monsters? If you're so capable, go ahead and do it. The middle-aged saint also spoke, but his tone was much gentler. Fellow Taoist, what we're doing isn't actually running away, but a strategic retreat. To preserve the last spark of humanity, this is a last resort. The elderly saint also spoke, his voice righteous. We hope you will consider the bigger picture, and not act rashly. Open the time-space passage to the present era, so that we can preserve the last spark of humanity. We beg you. Heng tilted his head, listening to the three of them. So do you even realize that you're all trash? He coldly uttered these words. Chapter 371 Two Choices. Upon hearing this, the three sages' expressions turned extremely ugly. They were actually being called trash? The elderly sage narrowed his eyes and slowly spoke. Fellow Taoist, don't go too far. If they weren't so blind to Heng's true strength, they would have already used swift and decisive methods to suppress him based on his words alone. Was I being too harsh? Heng said calmly. You are the historical spirits of humanity, born because of humanity. Yet now you choose to abandon the future of humanity and flee to the present? What are you if not trash? Or do you think the present is safe? He smiled contemptuously at this point. In terms of true danger, the hopeless future was far less dangerous than the present. Because the present truly bordered the great void, facing all sorts of strange and wondrous things within it. How could a simple future compare? The impetuous young sage immediately exploded, about to attack. However, he was restrained by the middle-aged and elderly sages, signaling him not to act rashly. The elderly sage continued. Fellow Taoist, you needn't provoke us further. While our request is for our own lives, it's also for the sake of humanity. The future is hopeless, heaven and earth are hopeless. As the spirits of human history, we can only carry the last embers of our existence to the present era, and then head to the great void, far from this calamity-ridden world. This is precisely our purpose. Since Heng had seen through their intentions, they laid their cards on the table. Hearing this, Heng was even more amused. A child still in its cradle dares to leave its cradle? Isn't that courting death? The calamity originates from the great void outside, and you actually want to go there? He shook his head, finding the three utterly ignorant. The great void was extremely dangerous. Even he, now, hadn't considered leaving heaven and earth, let alone these three spirits of history, far weaker than him. To rashly go to the great void was like lambs to the slaughter. Back then, when his divine sense was attached to the red-haired monster, the monster traveled along the cycle of reincarnation through the great void, and he had taken the opportunity to see many scenes of the great void. Seeing various world remnants before was one thing. But recently, they even saw terrifying, inexplicable figures wandering in the great void, constantly devouring those world remnants, and even attempting to collide with the cycle of reincarnation. If it weren't for the mysterious power protecting the cycle of reincarnation, the red-haired monster in his divine sense would have faced annihilation. However, they disagreed with this statement. The elderly saint spoke again. Fellow Taoist, you are mistaken. Know how vast the great void is. How many worlds are contained within it. Even if the calamity is terrifying and inexplicable, it cannot completely cover the great void. We only need to escape the area covered by the calamity. Interesting, so you have that kind of strength? Li Heng retorted. That's still better than staying here and waiting to die, the young saint retorted. With me here, it's not waiting to die. Besides, your suicide missions are not much better than waiting to die, and you might even die faster, Li Heng said calmly. Hell, what a boastful tone, the young saint sneered. In his view, this was just Li Heng boasting. This inexplicable calamity, its mysterious power clearly surpassing that of heaven and earth, is something no living being within the universe can withstand. It's like humanity boasting that they can handle a solar explosion. Yet, even an ordinary person knows the terrifying power of the sun. The sun's volume is 1.3 million times that of Earth, and the energy it releases every second is enough for humanity to use for hundreds of thousands of years, equivalent to billions of megaton-level nuclear reactors. This is the difference between Earth and the sun, the difference between the present world and that inexplicable calamity, and the latter gap will only widen. Fellow Taoist, I know what you're worried about, the elderly sage sighed. I have a detailed plan. Our escape to the great void isn't aimless. We've calculated a passage to the true realm, which was once the gateway to all worlds. We can use the true realm as a transit point to seek refuge in various worlds. Li Heng was even more amused. This wasn't just lambs to the slaughter, it was lambs to hell. Everyone else flees to safety, so why are these three running towards danger? You three are truly ignorant. The great void is dangerous enough, and you still want to run to the true realm? Are you pretending to be stupid or are you really stupid? The true realm has already fallen, and now it's so dangerous that only those at the Void Deo realm are qualified to survive there. You're not even at the Void Deo realm yet. Li Heng shook his head with a sigh. If these three weren't historical spirits of the human race, and still somewhat useful in helping him manage the situation, he wouldn't be wasting his time explaining common sense. The three saints were stunned upon hearing this. Fellow Taoist, are you joking? The true realm used to be known as the immortal realm, with real immortals and gods residing there. How could it have fallen so easily? And how do you know about the true realm? Li Heng was even more speechless upon hearing this. How many years has it been since these three's information was updated? Is it because they are historical spirits? They only know history? Why would I lie to you? Believe it or not. Li Heng said calmly. He now realized that the initiative was in his hands. These three historical spirits couldn't sneak into the present era on their own. They could only rely on him. The three saints hesitated for a moment. Could you explain why you know this information, fellow Taoist? You claim you can resolve the future crisis, but please demonstrate your strength, otherwise, it's difficult for us three to be convinced, the elderly saint said. Li Heng smiled. It seems the three of you still can't grasp the situation? You are not qualified for me to prove anything. The Earth Dharma image manifested behind Li Heng, displaying the power of the vast Earth, directly immobilizing the three saints. The three saints were initially furious. But when they unleashed whatever power they used, whatever their trump cards, they couldn't escape the suppression of the Earth Dharma image. Clearly sensing the extremely high nature of Li Heng's power, they instantly fell silent. This level of being, this kind of existence, seemed to have no reason to deceive them. But why? Why would such a powerful being appear in the world? Why would the human race have such an awesome existence? Are the visitors from beyond the realm really that strong? It doesn't make sense. According to historical records, each era has its own protagonists, some of whom are visitors from beyond the realm. But their cultivation levels aren't that high. The strongest is only at the Void Heaven realm. But this one before them feels even higher than the Void Deo realm. They were momentarily stunned. I'm giving you two choices now. First, work for me. Second, have your intelligence shattered, and become a pure historical spirit again, working for me. Choose, Li Heng said calmly, standing with his hands behind his back. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 372 The Peach Blossom Spring. The three sages were stunned. This wasn't two choices, there was clearly only one. Their minds raced back to the history of humanity. Give me liberty or give me death. Since ancient times, who has ever escaped death? The heroic and indomitable deeds of humanity's ancestors surfaced in their hearts. Then, they spoke. You underestimate us. The three of us actually served your excellency willingly. The three sages smiled obsequiously. Heng raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Since that's the case, then I'll spare your lives. I originally thought that tools without consciousness were the best tools. His words echoed in the three sages' ears, seeping into their hearts and reverberating in their minds. Cold sweat broke out on their foreheads. They were somewhat relieved that they hadn't hesitated. Otherwise, they might have truly had their intelligence erased. Tell me what you know. Once this matter is settled, you might have a chance to travel to the present era. Heng said casually. The three sages nodded frantically, recounting everything they knew. After understanding everything, Heng seemed thoughtful, a plan vaguely forming in his mind. According to the three sages, they were spirits of human history, born at the beginning of the celestial upheaval, protecting humanity for over a year, keeping it free from pollution and leaving many traces on humankind. This is why they were called the three sages. But this didn't last long. A year after the celestial upheaval, two monsters named Fear and Evil appeared, sensing their existence and wanting to hunt them down. They were not strong enough to deal with Fear and Evil, so they had to leave humanity and flee throughout the world. However, because they were spirits of history, extremely special, they could travel through the gaps of time and the crevices of history. Therefore, they have not yet been successfully captured by the two monsters. But strangely, because of their departure, the traces they left on humanity grew weaker and weaker, slowly disappearing until finally, few even remembered them. Because of this, the foundation of their existence was weakened, transforming them into their current phantom form. If it weren't for their occasional manifestations, and the recent placement of statues in some shelters to strengthen their presence among humanity, they would likely have perished completely. You said you placed statues in the shelters? Heng asked. The elderly saint nodded. That's right, Your Excellency. The title of Your Excellency was very natural. The statues not only protect the shelters but also strengthen our presence among humanity, preventing them from forgetting us. They were effective for a while, but recently, for some reason, we can no longer sense their presence, and the presence among humanity has been erased again, the middle-aged saint explained. Strengthened, really only once. But your statues are still there. The people in the shelters even remember you, Heng said calmly. His gaze pierced the void, landing on the number 1 shelter, known as Peach Blossom Spring, which contained the statues of the three saints. At this moment, the future savior, Xiao Hao, also arrived there. Within Peach Blossom Spring, the land was flat and spacious, the houses neatly arranged, with fertile fields, beautiful ponds, mulberry trees, and bamboo groves. Paths crisscrossed, and the sounds of chickens and dogs could be heard. Xiao Hao stared at the scene before him, somewhat dazed. No wonder it's the number 1 shelter of the B rank. It's no wonder it's called Peach Blossom Spring. To be able to carve out a peaceful haven in this filthy, chaotic, and distorted world, he murmured to himself, somewhat shocked. Although it couldn't compare to the present era, he knew that to create such a shelter, a small world, a small paradise in such a disparate time was already incredibly difficult. He knew that the shelter he had previously stayed in was just a series of dilapidated wooden huts, situated atop a cemetery, where he could see small graves through the windows at night. Those graves were manifestations of the polluted rules of the outside world. There was no way around it, even shelters couldn't completely isolate themselves from pollution, and the distorted rules of heaven and earth would still affect them. Xiao Hao had always considered this common sense. But now it seemed that common sense was about to be shattered. He saw no signs of pollution in Peach Blossom Spring. He wondered, were there really such big differences between shelters of the same B rank? Welcome, fellow Daoists, and all of you of our kind, to Peach Blossom Spring. The voice, heard before the person, emanated from a tiled house. Immediately afterward, the owner of Peach Blossom Spring, an old man dressed as a fisherman, emerged from the house. Judging by his aura, he was also a celestial being. He approached Xiao Hao and his group at their shelter, speaking familiarly with Xiao Lishan and the other two celestial being elders. What? Such a thing has happened. Alice, the situation is getting worse. I didn't expect your shelter to be discovered too. Shelters are becoming increasingly rare. Don't worry, it's alright. You can stay in Peach Blossom Spring. I guarantee that these monsters will not find you here. Xiao Hao listened to the conversation without speaking. This was a meeting of celestial being experts, he had no right to interrupt. However, when he heard the old fisherman's lament, a strange unease arose in his heart. He muttered to himself, "Why does this Peach Blossom Spring seem so isolated?" He didn't think much of it, carefully looking around, and discovered 3 statues standing in the very center of this Peach Blossom Spring, a boy, a middle-aged man, and an old man. Could these be the so-called statues of saints? Xiao Hao wondered. Before his rebirth, he neither knew nor bothered to think about saints. But after his rebirth, knowing that he was reborn because of those 3 saints, his mind began to stir. His father said that the statues of saints possessed incredible divine power, capable of protecting humanity, preventing the pollution of external rules, and even preventing monsters from discovering the refuge. They were humanity's hope. But were they really that miraculous? These 3 statues looked completely ordinary. He pondered this with some confusion. Then, as he looked, he suddenly froze. Because before him, a virtual light screen appeared. Words emerged on the screen. Main Quest 1. Investigate the truth of Peach Blossom Spring and the statues of the 3 saints. Quest reward, Celestial Realm Cultivation. Quest penalty, I won't even punish you. After reading the specific quest details, especially the penalty, Xiao Hao's heart sank. What did he mean by the truth of Peach Blossom Spring? Explain yourself clearly. At this moment, Li Heng gazed at the scene, his eyes filled with melancholy. Peach Blossom Spring? A place where paths crisscrossed and the sounds of chickens and dogs could be heard. What a neat and orderly Peach Blossom Spring. If he remembered correctly, the word paths could also mean small paths leading to graves. Chapter 373 The Land of the Dead. Peach Blossom Spring, a paradise on earth, a place of peace and happiness. But upon closer examination, in a world where heaven and earth have become corrupted and distorted, where rules have been twisted and polluted, can such a paradise and place of peace truly exist? If so, it can only be a place for the dead. When Li Heng first saw the Peach Blossom Spring, he didn't pay much attention, but after he told the 3 sages about the statues of the 3 sages there, their reactions became strange, their expressions turning somewhat eerie. Your Excellency, this shouldn't be happening. The first sanctuary of the Class B, Peach Blossom Spring? Wasn't this sanctuary destroyed long ago? The elderly sage exclaimed in surprise. Destroyed? Li Heng raised an eyebrow slightly. He turned his gaze back to the Peach Blossom Spring, and after issuing the main quest to Xiao Hao through the savior system, he began to observe carefully, trying to uncover the truth behind this Peach Blossom Spring. Sure enough, looking down from his vantage point, he saw that Peach Blossom Spring was wider at the front and narrower at the back, shaped like a coffin. Wisps of deathly aura emanated from it, though they seemed to be concealed by some force. Peach Blossom Spring was a coffin, a graveyard? When did Peach Blossom Spring perish? Li Heng asked casually. Actually, we don't know either, but it must have perished after we lost our connection to the statues. In other words, once a statue loses its connection, the corresponding refuge is basically doomed as well, the elderly saint said, shaking his head. So how many statues do you have left now? This. The elderly saint hesitated for a moment, then respectfully replied, in our perception, there are no statues left. Doesn't that mean humanity is extinct? Li Heng asked in surprise. That's also what puzzles the 3 of us. If humanity were to perish in the future, we would have vanished long ago. But if humanity hasn't perished, why have our statues lost their connection? The elderly saint frowned. Li Heng also pondered slightly. There are many possibilities for this situation. Either the 3 people's senses are malfunctioning, or all humans are dead, or perhaps humans are gradually dying out. He leaned towards the 3rd possibility. He turned his gaze back to Peach Blossom Spring. At this moment, Xiao Hao was carefully studying the 3 saint statues, trying to figure out what was wrong. However, before he could gain any results, Xiao Lishan, who had finished talking with the others, pulled him aside. You unfilial son, don't touch things randomly. This isn't your home, we're living under someone else's roof now, Xiao Lishan admonished Xiao Hao with a helpless expression. This kid had been acting strangely ever since he woke up from his coma, leaving him completely baffled. Xiao Hao nodded somewhat blankly. Just as he was about to calm down and continue his research, he caught a glimpse of a small blue spot on Xiao Lishan's arm. Huh, Dad, what's this? Xiao Hao asked, pointing at the small blue spot in confusion. What? Xiao Lishan was somewhat bewildered. It's this, the little blue spots. Xiao Hao pointed directly at the small spots. Xiao Lishan was even more confused. He looked at his arm, speechless. Where are the small spots? Your father is a celestial being, I wouldn't have this level of distortion. Don't be so paranoid. Xiao Hao was stunned. His father didn't see it, didn't sense it? He suddenly remembered something and quickly checked himself. He found that blue spots had also appeared on his arm, and the spots had densely covered an area, even more serious than his father Xiao Lishan's situation. This is lividity. He suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. Li Heng, on the other hand, withdrew his gaze, deep in thought. What happens when a living person enters a coffin? First, they become a living dead, then a dead person. He had just used his source power to look through his eyes and found that Peach Blossom Spring was indeed a giant coffin, with mounds of graves, a true land of the dead. Except for Xiao Hao and the others who had just arrived in Peach Blossom Spring, everyone else was already dead. Moreover, even Xiao Hao and the others who had just entered Peach Blossom Spring had developed lividity and other signs of death. If they stayed any longer, they would become like the dead, unable to escape. This was the truth behind the tranquil Peach Blossom Spring. Li Heng recalled some records about Peach Blossom Spring. For example, initially extremely narrow, barely enough for a person to pass through. Wasn't that like the entrance to a tomb? But why did this phenomenon occur in Peach Blossom Spring? Why did a destroyed sanctuary become a land of the dead? Since Peach Blossom Spring had such a situation, were other sanctuaries the same? While Li Heng pondered, the three sages exchanged bewildered glances. To be honest, they hadn't expected that a destroyed sanctuary would reappear, and according to their venerable one, the humans inside were still alive and well. How could this be? As the historical spirits of humanity, they could clearly sense the current state of humanity. The number of pure humans, or rather, humans who hadn't been completely mutated into monsters, was decreasing. Even within a sanctuary, there was a risk of contamination. How could humans possibly survive under such circumstances? They could even conjure up some secluded paradise, a Shangri-La. Can you sense the locations of other shelters? Li Heng asked the three sages. The three sages shook their heads. Reporting to your majesty, we could indeed sense them some time ago. But recently, the marks we left on humanity have disappeared again, and we can no longer sense the locations of other shelters. Moreover, these shelters are all small worlds, their coordinates are not fixed, they wander throughout the world to avoid being discovered by those monsters, so even if we know their previous locations, it's not very useful. Li Heng was speechless. Were these three historical spirits in such dire straits? No wonder they wanted to run away. The historical spirits, who should have been closely connected to humanity and able to sense all the major and minor disturbances within humanity, had their connection to humanity severed. It seemed that an invisible giant hand was controlling everything. This was something that the monster's fear and evil couldn't have accomplished alone. Sure enough, there was definitely a mastermind lurking behind it all. However, now that Your Excellency has found the location of the Peach Blossom Spring Shelter, perhaps we can use it to glean information and locations of other shelters, the elderly sage suggested. Li Heng smiled and shook his head. Your vision is still too limited. To deal with this situation, there's no need for any scheming or planning. We should step outside the chessboard and simply overturn it. A righteous person doesn't play chess. Playing chess is a waste of time and ambition. With a thought, Li Heng's true form, located outside the despairing future, unleashed his power. Chapter 374 was over in seconds. What else is there to say? Sometimes, stirring up trouble isn't necessarily a bad thing. It can force the snakes lurking in the shadows to emerge. Now that Li Heng knows these shelters are gradually heading towards death, and is no longer completely clueless, he must take action to see what monsters are behind this phenomenon of death. Outside the despair future, Li Heng's true form stands on the divine bridge, casting down his power. The power transforms into golden light, directly piercing through the bubble of despair future and enveloping his clone within. At this moment, the three saints stare dumbfounded at the golden pillar of light shining down from the sky, instantly enveloping Li Heng. What's going on? Why did he suddenly create such a huge commotion? No. They were hiding perfectly well. For a moment, they felt a sense of collapse. They knew that making such a commotion would definitely attract the attention of the two monsters, fear and evil, and they would be caught red-handed, unable to escape. Even though Heng had previously shown great strength and directly suppressed them, they didn't believe that Heng could be compared to those two monsters working together. Even if they could defeat him, there was still a third monster watching. They exchanged glances, feeling an urge to flee. But the next moment, they couldn't escape. Their fears had come true. In that chaotic, corrupt world, two extremely malevolent and frenzied gazes were cast upon them, the two monsters, fear and evil. Under their gazes, the void around them was sealed off. They had nowhere to run. The three saints were now somewhat desperate. What was this? But they dared not express their resentment towards Heng or utter words of anger. They could only helplessly look at Heng, still shrouded in golden light, hoping he could truly defeat these two monsters. The fear monster's gaze held a hint of doubt. It seemed to recognize Heng's aura and instantly became somewhat angry. It was actually the being who had killed his projection in the modern era, causing the impact to affect his true form. How dare it? Damn it! It even dared to run to the future. Fear was furious to the extreme. Even though his projection had been killed by Heng in one blow, he never considered himself weaker than Heng. In his view, it was merely Heng's strongest attack, leveraging his home field advantage in the modern era. But now, this was the future, a future of despair. This was his home turf. He was confident he was fully capable of killing this being. He also felt this being should realize this. Yet, this being still came to the future. Was this audacity, or contempt for him? Fear didn't want to think, he only wanted this being dead. So he made his move. The wicked one, noticing Fear's anger, was somewhat surprised, but such beings were, after all, great and omniscient. Therefore, after a moment's thought, he understood the reason. So that's how it is. Interesting. This being from the modern era actually managed to injure Fear? It seems quite powerful. But unfortunately, this seems to be just a fool, otherwise, I would have wanted to take him as a familiar. How dare he personally come to the future? The wicked one also disapproved of Heng's actions. Since this is a matter of grudges with Fear, I'll refrain from intervening. Making too much noise might awaken the sovereign. The wicked pondered for a moment, intending to remain silent. After all, in the future he envisioned, the being shrouded in golden light would be instantly killed by Fear. And this monster, Fear, lived up to its name. Upon its appearance, even the distorted and corrupted rules of heaven and earth, the order chains that had become monsters, were terrified and forced to yield. At this moment, the tide of fear swept across the heavens and earth. Inside the golden pillar of light, Heng slowly opened his eyes, meeting Fear's gaze calmly. Then, he shook his head in disappointment and sighed. This monster named Fear had nothing to do with the truth of the gradual death of humanity in Peach Blossom Spring or other human sanctuaries. Since it was unrelated, it shouldn't block his way. The golden pillar of light dissipated, and Heng pointed a finger. The tide of fear shattered instantly. Even the body of fear, whether flesh and blood, materialized, or conceptualized, shattered under this single finger strike from the void. Ultimately, no matter how much home field advantage this monster of fear had, and with the intervention of its true self, it was merely a relatively strong monster at the Voidale realm. It could handle the weak, but it was far from enough to deal with him. With a projection of his true self's power, he had now reached a level possessing the elements of creation. Compared to lower-level existences, he stood in the unblemished saint realm. Therefore, even if he hadn't intervened, this so-called tide of fear, this monster of fear's enraged attack, would have had absolutely no effect on him. After annihilating the monster of fear's body, he received no source energy sensing, clearly indicating that the monster of fear wasn't completely dead. However, Heng didn't continue to pay attention, instead letting his thoughts sweep across this distorted and corrupted world, trying to find the truth behind its gradual death. He could simply finish it off in the end. At this moment, the three saints and the wicked monster finally reacted to Heng's earth-shattering attack, falling into endless shock. One finger blasted the monster of fear? How was that possible? Is it really that exaggerated? The three saints gasped. Even in their prime, when they were newly born and closely connected with humanity, the three of them together could barely handle the monster fear. Moreover, Once the other evil monster attacked, they would be completely helpless. Yet Li Heng could obliterate fear with a single finger. Would dealing with the evil monster be a piece of cake? They were all secretly relieved that they had yielded in time, otherwise they would have died without even knowing how. With such strength, perhaps, they could really save the future? If they could defeat that third monster. But when they thought of that third monster, and the psychological shadow that made them tremble, they became uncertain again. The evil monster was dumbfounded. As great as it was, as omniscient as it was, its prediction had gone wrong. It wasn't fear that killed that being with one blow. But this being killed fear with one blow? It could sense that fear's condition was very bad. If it weren't for the blessing of the sovereign, it would probably be dead by now. Even if it wasn't dead now, it would take thousands of years to recover from such injuries. What to do now? He simply can't handle such a powerful being. Unless he awakens the Overlord. On Li Heng's side, stirring up trouble and displaying great power comes at a price. He's already being subtly repelled by this despairing future, fiercely preventing him from searching the entire world. He can even sense that this monster, despairing future, has already awakened, begun examining itself, discovered this large alien entity within it, and is preparing to eliminate it. Chapter 375 Ending the Monster. Under absolute power, concealment is useless. Even though Li Heng was currently being rejected by the despairing future, he quickly located all the human sanctuaries and found that they were all in the same state as Peach Blossom Spring. They were either gradually dying or had already died completely, becoming a land of the dead. Moreover, the humans within the sanctuaries were completely unaware of this. They truly didn't know how they died. No wonder the three saints lost their senses of the human sanctuaries, since most of the truly living humans were dead. However, before he could make any further moves, Li Heng sensed a gaze locked onto him. The moment this gaze appeared, this distorted and corrupted world actually began to decay and end once more, with an aura similar to the 5 signs of decay flowing through it. The three saints beside Li Heng were immediately panicked. This gaze, could it be the third monster? No way, wasn't that monster sleeping and gestating? How could it suddenly awaken? They frantically thought and guessed wildly. Li Heng, on the other hand, was somewhat surprised, because he sensed that the monster behind that gaze was no ordinary being, also surpassing the Void Deo realm, and likely belonging to a level possessing the elements of creation. Could this be the third monster? He pondered. Yet, he could sense from the causal level that the monster behind this gaze was unrelated to the truth of the gradual death of humanity in the human sanctuary, meaning that the cause of humanity's demise was something else entirely. At this moment, he received a telepathic message from the three saints. Your Excellency, be careful, this is the third monster. Hearing the three saints' panicked, even fearful words, Li Heng nodded, reassuring them not to panic. Although he and the monster behind this gaze belonged to the same level, their combat strength would differ. In the netherworld, in the place of distortion and contamination, the wicked knelt in the void, worshipping the Great Ruler. Great Ruler, please intervene and end this variable, the wicked murmured. The ruler withdrew his gaze and looked back at the wicked. An aura of anger flowed through the void, cracking it open without any force or intervention, seemingly rage at the wicked's incompetence. The wicked trembled in fear, speechless. He knew the sovereign's greatness, the end of all things, the finality of creation. His awakening, his presence in the world, represented the future, the end of heaven and earth. Therefore, he didn't want to awaken a sovereign unless absolutely necessary. Unfortunately, if he didn't, he would die. Li Heng, noticing the gaze withdraw, found the world calming down, as if the monster behind that gaze didn't want to attack him. But he was never afraid of trouble. If this monster wouldn't come for him, he would go after it. So, he too cast his gaze, following the lingering traces of cause and effect, traversing the void, arriving at the place of pollution and distortion. There he saw the kneeling wicked, and a terrifying monster still in the process of gestation. Li Heng found it difficult to describe the monster's form. Perhaps this monster has no shape, not flesh and blood, but a pure concept, symbolizing the end of heaven and earth. One glance at this monster, and Li Heng knew that its appearance signified the end of a hopeless future. Heaven and earth have 3 stages, beginning, prosperity, and end. And this monster occupies the last one. Li Heng pondered, no wonder the 3 saints were so afraid, even instinctively trembling. Of course they were afraid. A monster whose appearance signifies the end of everything. But, isn't this monster too normal? A thought suddenly popped into his head. Heng felt this monster of endurance didn't fit the style. It didn't fit the style of that inexplicable calamity, that mysterious power. If the inexplicable calamity, that mysterious power, led everything into chaos, distortion, corruption, and ultimately to the indescribable, plunging into terrifying, unknown abyss, then this monster, while also possessing chaotic and distorted characteristics, was more about ending heaven and earth, returning everything to nothingness. This characteristic was clearly too orderly. Yes, too orderly. Because the world also has the cycle of formation, existence, decay, and emptiness, unless it is a truly eternal universe, destruction and end are the norm. This is part of the order, not the chaos and unknown of inexplicable calamities. Could it be that this monster and the inexplicable calamity are not from the same source? But this monster also seems to have chaotic distortions. Heng suddenly fell into deep thought. He suddenly remembered what the immortal figure had said before, the calamities in the great void are endless, this is the norm. Perhaps there is more than one kind of calamity in the great void, inexplicable calamity? Is this monster a manifestation of another kind of calamity? Or is this monster just a derivative of the inexplicable calamity, exhibiting different degrees of mutation or deterioration, which is why it cannot fully inherit the characteristics of that unknown chaos? Heng compared this ending monster with the despair future monster and found that in terms of the characteristics of unknown chaos, the despair future monster was more original and purer. But interestingly, this ending monster was inside the despair future monster. Heng could also sense that if this ending monster was truly successfully conceived, it would definitely bring about the end of the despair future and kill the despair future monster. He suddenly remembered an analogy. If we compare the despair future monster to a human, then this ultimate monster is like a tumor within that body. Once this ultimate monster successfully develops and the tumor matures, becoming malignant, then the human dies, and the despair future monster dies as well. Perhaps this is the relationship between the two? Heng was somewhat amused and exasperated. What was this? The world and the future were polluted and mutated by a mysterious calamity, turning into monsters, and ultimately succumbing to the backlash? Of course, Heng knew the relationship couldn't be that simple. After all, the truth behind humanity's gradual demise hadn't been fully understood. Moreover, the essence of the despair future's appearance and its becoming the predetermined fate of the world was still due to that mysterious calamity, that enigmatic power. It wasn't the appearance of the despair future that caused the future of the world to be locked, becoming its predetermined fate. Rather, the future of the world was already locked, leading to the appearance of the despair future. The despair future wasn't the cause, but merely the effect. The relationship was intricate and lacked many necessary conditions for reasoning. And Heng was too lazy to think about it all, it would be a waste of time. Anyway, they were all monsters, and monsters die when killed. He might as well slaughter them and exchange them for source power. Although he had already alerted the enemy, he was too lazy to hide anything. He wanted to see just how deep the waters ran in this hopeless future, and what strange truths and monsters were lurking within. So, he threw a punch at the monster that was about to end the world. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all, see you in the next video.